I think people need to watch this Terry's Take video here. It's very interesting. It's just over 5-year-old, May 2020. Was Terry right? Let me know in the comment section. Alright, go on, pop, pop, bang. Peace out.
Guys, welcome to the Beautiful Boxing Podcast. I didn't announce this one because I wanted to surprise everyone. And I know for a while, even before I launched this podcast, people wanted me to do something about drugs and sport. But I'd never found a dance partner where I felt we could have the right conversation. And I didn't feel we could give boxing fans what they needed to move forward with this. And what I'm trying to do is I'm only ever going to do one episode, so this will be it. There'll be no follow-up episode. There'll be no part 2. This will be it. So we want to just give you the definitive episode on drugs and boxing. So after this, you should be able to think for yourselves. Don't be sheep anymore and believe that the sport's clean. We're just going to have a discussion about what the doping is, how it happens, why people aren't getting caught, whatever it is we need to discuss. And I found the perfect dance partner. He's been in the media. He's done the circuit. But he's come to the place where his voice will truly be heard. So I just want to welcome Larry Olubamiwo to the podcast. And Larry, welcome.
Thank you very much, Terry. I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on there.
It's like I said, like the aim of this episode is more to have the conversation and, you know, just to discuss the drugs and sport. And what I really want to do initially is give the fans a bit of an understanding of the landscape of doping. Like, because I think people just go, yeah, he's on steroids, which isn't necessarily true. Now, you can dope for years and never take a single steroid. That's not impossible. So it's just, I think by the end of this episode, we should be able to explain to people, it's like making a cocktail, you know, depending on what it is you're trying to make, you might need different ingredients in different quantities. So it's just that building that understanding. And I think with you, you know, as I said earlier, this is the perfect dance partner.
No, I appreciate it. So yeah, I think you explained that quite well. You know, a lot of people just think steroids, whereas there's many anabolic agents apart from steroids. There's the peptide hormones, the growth hormone, the hormones that help your body make its own testosterone, called HCG. Then you've got your other peptide hormones like insulin. You've got other peptide hormones that help you increase your stamina, i.e. EPO. You've got your stimulants, although they are rarely used because obviously they're easily tested for. There's such a wide variety of doping agents, and as you said, it all depends on what someone's looking for. I mean, even in the anabolic agents, even if you look at anabolic steroids, you've got anabolic steroids that will give you great bulk as well as strength. You've got anabolic steroids that will give you a lot of strength, but not a lot of bulk. And then you've got steroids specifically who will give you the strength and the stamina without the bulk, especially with the stamina. So, if you're a heavyweight, for instance, you might want to pack on, if you're a new heavyweight or you're moving up from a weight to heavyweight, you might want to pack on a bit more size. So, you might want to take an anabolic steroid, i.e. like Dianabol or Anapolon, Anadrol, to increase your muscle mass as well as your strength. If you are a welterweight, so you're not looking to put on any muscle mass because you have to make weight, obviously, but you want to increase your strength, you would take an anabolic steroid like Anavar or Winstrol or Primobolan. So these agents will allow you to get strong without putting on too much weight. If you are peaking for a fight and you don't want to put on any, or you just want to increase your aggression for that fight, then you're looking at an anabolic steroid like halotestin. which will not put any weight on you, but it'll get you really strong and really aggressive, really energetic for the fight. A lot of fighters take allotestin, not just in the boxing world, but in the MMA world as well. So that's just anabolic steroids. That and then in that field, you can see that there's a variety of agents that will be able to give you different effects depending on what you're looking for.
And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at how boxers dope and how bodybuilders dope, actually the compounds that bodybuilders will laugh at and go, we don't need that. You actually realize in boxing and other sports, they love them. So you use the example of Primo there. If you remember, I think when they did the baseball scandal, what was surprising was how many baseball players were on Primo. I think Barry Bonds was accused of it and Alex Rodriguez, who were at the top of the sport. And so, it's literally horses for courses. So the doping profile of a bodybuilder is different to a doping profile for a powerlifter. And to the common man, you'd think they'd be doing the same things. Just like the doping profile for a bodybuilder and the doping profile for a boxer are completely different because they need different things. Yeah.
I would even go so far as to say a doping profile for a heavyweight boxer is going to be different for a doping profile for a welterweight boxer. Because again, they need different things. Even though they're in the same sport, they do need different things. So it will be still quite different. So you see, it's not a cookie cutter sort of a thing where you take this, take that amount, and that's it. It's very specific, and this is why the guys at the top of any sport will employ professionals like, i.e., doctors and chemists, to get the right protocol for them and make sure that they can pass tests.
And it's fascinating as well because if you look at how the sport's evolved, I always like to go back in time, and if we go back to like the origins of doping as we know it, I know people can go back to the ancient Greeks and the herbs and stuff that they used to take before they'd wrestle each other, but I'm talking about more the modern age, like almost the manufactured doping. That goes back to the Nazis, where the Nazis were trying to create super soldiers. And so the research into testosterone and its benefits in terms of being able to create super soldiers starts there, along with compounds like the amphetamines and so forth. So the Russians took that to another level and said, okay, but we need something better than testosterone because we're getting a lot of the effects we don't want, i.e. the androgenic effects, and not enough of the effects we do want, i.e. the anabolic effects, so the muscle building and the strength gains and the bone mineral density. Because that's what people fail to realize, that testosterone and its synthetic variants don't just build muscle. They act on a number of different pathways which end up with you being stronger. So it's not only going to affect muscle, it's going to affect your bones. It might even affect your red blood cell count. So you might actually find that an associated benefit of doping, even without wanting it, is your stamina increases. So and so what the Russians did is they started to play around with these variables and go, let's create something that gives us the anabolic effects we want and reduces the androgenic. And I always get these two mixed up. I think it was it D-bol or Decker they came up with first? It was D-bol, I think.
It was probably D-bol because Dianabol. It was probably Decker that they came up with, because D-bol was actually made by the Americans.
Dr. Ziegler.
Yeah, Dr. Ziegler. So the whole story on that is fascinating in itself, because when Dr. Ziegler was in charge of the weight training, the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team, I forgot what Olympics it was, but they got outclassed by the Soviet Union, basically.
It was either 56 or 60.
Yeah. So one of those two. So they basically got outclassed, and he took the head coach of the Soviet Union team out for dinner or whatever, and was basically quizzing him about how they were able to literally destroy the US team. And apparently he got him so drunk that the guy then willfully came out with it and told them that they were using testosterone. So then Ziegler started experimenting with testosterone, and he got some results, but he didn't get the results that he really wanted. And then that's when, as you said, he formed a partnership with CBER to make Dianabol. And so Dianabol was literally people go on like these Germans were the first ones to manufacture a medication just for performance enhancement. It was actually the Americans, because Dianabol was made specifically for sports enhancement, and then was put on the market later on for other ailments. But yeah, Dr. Ziegler came up with Dianabol and gave it to the US Olympic weightlifting team, and they completely smashed it. So he actually I've read that he actually regrets making Dianabol, because he said that a lot of the athletes were just taking in too much after a while, and they were getting some were getting ill, and he wishes he'd never made it, but it is what it is.
Because
Sorry, go on.
Because we didn't understand things like liver toxicity back then. It was just
exactly. I mean, now it to be honest, liver toxicity is an overplayed thing in the world of anabolics. But yeah, it is a factor, but it's easily remedied nowadays. But back then, obviously, they didn't really know too much about that. But going back to what you were saying about doping before Ziegler, when the Nazis were doing it, isn't it fascinating how apparently Hitler was known to have used testosterone and amphetamines as well as his troops, and the Nazis performed massive experiments with these substances on the prisoners of war, mainly the Jews that they captured, and they kept vast amounts of information on this. And when the Allies eventually won the war, these scientists were actually taken in by the Soviets and the Americans. They weren't put on trial for war crimes or anything, but because they had so much knowledge, they were taken in by them. And this is why you have the doping situation that you have now is actually an extension of that, which is fascinating to me.
It is. And just on that point of, them capturing the doctors, this is almost an aside. I find it interesting that in every sports team, the doctors they have seem to have an endocrinology background. It's never just a standard GP. It is literally, we need someone who understands endocrinology, which I always find interesting in sports teams. But But that period of the 60s for me is interesting, because I think that's when the notion of doping goes mainstream, because those substances weren't illegal. There was no VADA, there was no WADA, there was no testing at this point. So this is when you're starting to see. So the bodybuilders are seeing what the weightlifters are doing, and they're going, oh, okay, maybe we need to try using some of that. And so it starts to diffuse across other sports. So when people ask me the question, do I think people were doping in the 60s? I'm like, well, we see it as doping. Yeah, we see it as doping. But back then, that was the equivalent of taking a teaspoonful of creatine. Do you see what I mean? It wasn't wrong. So if you knew it existed, why wouldn't you?
Well, you hit them. You that's why you are we are both the perfect dance partner for each other right now, because this is what I try to explain to a lot of people because I get the question, as you probably always get as well. Do I think a lot of great athletes in the past were doping? And as you just said, it wasn't seen as doping then, because all you have to do was go to your doctor and ask for a prescription for it, and the doctor will write you a prescription. Because even though it's not illegal in this country and various other countries, In America, it is now. It's treated almost as bad as Class A drugs. But back then in America, it wasn't illegal at all. In fact, it only became illegal in 1990 after the Ben Johnson scandal. So anabolic steroids in the 60s were very widely used. In fact, there's a story. In fact, not a story. It's actually known as fact because a lot of NFL guys have actually admitted to it. In the 60s, a lot of the NFL teams used to put when they used to have camps with their teams, and obviously everyone wake up for breakfast. They would come to the breakfast table and they will see a huge bowl filled with Dianabol tablets, and that's where the nickname "Breakfast of Champions" came from. That's where the nickname "Breakfast of Champions" came from, because the NFL team had literally bowls of it on their breakfast table with their cereal, whatever they were eating, and yeah, they were told to dig in. So yeah, that's where the Breakfast of Champions moniker came into it. But yeah, so if and as you said, it trickled down because a lot of bodybuilders were weightlifters at the time. I mean, bodybuilding is not like how it is now, with the freak show that it is now. A lot of bodybuilders back then were actually athletes. So there are a lot of bodybuilders competed in weightlifting, competed in powerlifting. Even Arnold competed in powerlifting and weightlifting. So that would have crossed over very easily. And then obviously you had your shot putters and discus throwers, involved in the weightlifting and powerlifting as well. So it would have trickled over into that. And then obviously you had some sprinters who were extremely powerful, who were doing weight training or weightlifting, and it trickled down into that. So you could see, like, slowly but surely, that there was this trickle down effect. And then obviously when athletes were using them and saw that they were effective, then they will carry on using them, pass it on to the next one, and pass it on to the next one. And that's how it became rife. I mean, I remember reading in Charlie Francis's book, Speed Trap, about how he got involved in using substances at first, in the late 60s and early 70s. And it was a very similar story, and as you said before, these drugs weren't tested for until 76, and even then the testing was inadequate because it was on the day testing, and we all know that anabolic steroids are training drugs, so it's not like a stimulant where you need to use it on the day of the actual competition to get the benefits of it. Anabolic steroids or peptide hormones are training drugs, so you need to train harder during a certain period of time to get its effects, and then you'll see the effects down the line in competition. So yeah, it's naive for anyone to think that any athlete during the period before it was banned wasn't using them, because again, like you just said, it was just like using creatine.
And I think that 70s period is what I call the gateway to the modern era, because if you look at America, for example, that's when the NFL really exploded and became America's game. You've got color TV, you've got larger than life characters, and these guys are, even in college, I think they've all, when you watch these documentaries, the American football players admit that they were even taking stuff in college. Some were doing stuff in high school. And there's that period in the 70s where in the US, it became a thing. Like, you just took steroids. If you were around the Gold's gym scene, Venice Beach in the 70s, around Arnold, you just took them. Even if you weren't a bodybuilder, you took them to look like Arnold. And then in the East, the Russians led the program. The East Germans took it to another level, where they productionized the whole performance enhancement culture. So from actively selecting people who would be good athletes, getting them to breed in a lot of cases, and then with those offspring, starting to push them through the doping program. I think the East German doping program is probably, as cruel as it was, it's probably the best documented program in terms of PEDs. And actually, a lot of what they did formed the blueprint of what came afterwards. So it's that period there from about 76 to 84 when it became
Yeah.
really like industrialized. And then obviously in America you had the guys with their underground. Was it Dan Duchesne with the underground steroid
Yeah.
handbook?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. Still got a copy of that actually. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that's when it was accessible to a lot more people. Now you didn't have to be around the few people that knew. You could be out in your own little part of the world experimenting. And so I think that almost takes us to that period in the 80s now where you had the addition of growth hormone. Like, now, if you remember, the original source of growth hormone was cadavers. Like, you took it out
Yeah.
of dead bodies.
Yeah.
And so they had to stop that because people got infections from using...
Yeah, people were getting infected with CJD, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, mad cow disease, basically.
Yeah, from using cadaverous growth hormone. So then, the powers that be invested a lot of money in synthesizing that. And then that became the one that was interesting. And people shine the light on Carl Lewis, don't they, in that sense, where they say, why is a grown man, wearing braces all of a sudden?
Braces, yeah. See, I know. That's how I know you know your stuff. In fact, if you remember clearly, the whole Santa Monica track team all had braces. Him, Leroy Burrell, Dennis Mitchell. They all, even the females, they all had braces.
Yeah, because they were early adopters of that growth hormone, which was and it was at that time that was still theoretical. Well, if you just inject cadaverous growth hormone, you will get the benefits too. And and then so you get to that watershed point in terms of doping. Ben Johnson running 9:79 in the 1988 Olympics, which when we look back on it, you almost look and go, I don't believe anyone was clean in that race, and because history's gone on to show that. Because what was the 1, 2, 3? It was Johnson, Lewis, and Linford, wasn't it? With Dennis Mitchell fourth.
Yeah. I think Dennis Mitchell was Calvin Smith was fourth. Yeah, Calvin Smith was probably the only clean guy in there. Probably. Yeah. Yeah, but that race has now been called the dirtiest race in history. Although I disagree with that because I think there's been a lot more dirtier races than that. But obviously it's well known because of what happened with Ben Johnson. And I mean we now know Carl Lewis was doping his doping his eyeballs out. Linford was doing his thing. Patrick Stewart from Jamaica was doing his thing. Dennis Mitchell was doing his thing. He's been caught. All of those guys, I think apart from Calvin Smith, that's why I say probably wasn't doping. But again, that doesn't mean anything if you haven't been caught. All of the guys apart from Calvin Smith had been caught at some point doping. So one of them also being Desai Williams, who was a training partner of Ben Johnson. So yeah, that race for me. I'll be honest with you. I remember watching that race when I was 10 years old, and I knew then I was going to take anabolic steroids because I remember when the scandal came out, and everyone in my school, and I was still in primary school, obviously by that time, was slating him, and I was the only one defending him. And it's funny that I think back to it now, and I was thinking, wow, I actually defended Ben Johnson at that age. That was a sign that I know what I was going to do in the future.
It's a reminder of that scene in Goodfellas where they describe Jimmy Conway as the guy that cheered for the bad guy in the movies.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. Yeah. Although I didn't see him as the bad guy, you know what I mean? And obviously history has shown that he wasn't the bad guy. He was doing just what everyone else was doing.
Yeah.
In fact, Carl Lewis comes out as the worst person during that era, with his backbiting, his gossiping, just because he was on top, and then Ben Johnson came along and took him off his throne, and he then decided to badmouth and slander the guy. He doesn't. I've never liked Carl Lewis, to be honest with you, and I was so happy when the stuff that came out about him did come out and was documented.
Are these the failed tests that they covered up?
Yeah, failed. Yeah. So in the '84 Olympics, it was because because that was the first Olympics to turn a profit, because it was in LA, obviously. And obviously part of that was Carl Lewis Gansbury's 4 gold medals. So that played a massive part in them turning a profit. So obviously to not derail that, the Princeton Road, who was the IOC, either IOC president or vice president or whatever at the time, he got the a copy or the printout of the people who'd failed tests at the Olympics, and he then proceeded to shred them. And that's not even taken into account what happened in the US trials before those Olympics, where a whole load of US athletes failed tests, including Carl Lewis, and that was swept under the carpet because obviously the US was hosting the Olympics and they wanted a good Olympics for themselves, which will then go into what I'm going to talk about later on in the 2012 Olympics. But anyway,
because one of the things the '88 Olympics did for me, and I look back on it now and I go, I think that was the point where between the sponsors, the governing bodies, whoever, maybe even the government, there was a thing that said, we cannot have anyone big failing again this publicly, and definitely not during the Olympics.
I think you're right there, because I think what hurt Ben Johnson was that he wasn't from a big country, like athletically. So Carl Lewis was never going to get caught at that time. Linford was never going to get caught at that time because the UK and the US were athletically very big countries. They had a lot of influence. There's many athletes from different Eastern European countries that wouldn't be caught. But Ben Johnson being from Canada, which wasn't a country of influence in the athletic world, he was seen as the fall guy. Even if you read Speed Trap, Charlie Francis does indicate that they did have a chance to bribe someone to mess up the test, but in the end, the person didn't want to do it for Ben Johnson. So there's a lot of shenanigans going on at that time. Definitely.
Now, if you tie together all the threads we've discussed up until this point, the fact that by the 70s, doping was known across all sports, and that's not even something of debate anymore. And we go into the 80s now. Now you look at the boxers who were popping at the time: your Tysons, your Haglers, your Hearns, your Ray Leonards, your Durans. It's very difficult now to assume that they lived in a small, tiny bubble where they weren't touching anything.
Exactly.
It's almost ridiculous, isn't it, to say these guys who probably had the hardest job of anyone in sport were the guys that were like, oh, you guys are taking all that stuff and that's helping you perform better? Now we're just going to stay over here running up hills and, hitting bags filled with sand. That's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to get super fit. It seems ridiculous now, doesn't it?
Of course it is. And this is exactly what I say to people. And obviously, like you said, these same athletes, like your Sugar Ray Leonards, your Haglers, they're going to be mixing with other athletes, the sprinters, the shot putters, the whatevers. They're going to be mixing around with them. They're going to be in some instances they'll be cross training with them. So why would they not think that influence will jump into them? Or also, as we know, testing was literally non-existent or very, very lax at that time. So, and it's like what I say about the pay-per-view fighters now. What incentive do they have not to dope? I mean, all the incentive is there. You're gonna dope. You're gonna. If you dope, you earn plenty of money to feed your family. And this is another thing that really annoys me. Like, people talk about, oh yeah, you've got to do it clean. You've got to do it the right way. Do you think that most of these people that are getting involved in sport care about that? They're caring about providing a living for themselves and their families, and that's it. The rest falls by the wayside. So when someone, and you hear this constantly, especially in the boxing world. Oh yeah, you got to do it the right way. Yeah, we don't want to cheat. We don't. the person who's coming up the hot, from the family who has no money, could barely afford boxing gloves, they don't care about that. The person, like, even if you look at the person who can't afford athletic spikes to run on the track, they don't care about doing it the right way or doing it clean. They care about making money for themselves and their families, to uplift themselves and their families, and to to basically help themselves. So, all people need to really be realistic about things. And then when you talk about, these guys in the 80s coming up, that's exactly what they're thinking. We need to make money for ourselves and our families. And if we take this stuff, it gives us a better chance to do that. Bottom line, it's as simple as that, And people around the world try and complicate this issue, but that is basically it in a nutshell.
And you're 100% right. I just think it's harder not to dope, and we spoke off air about this. And I'll go back to my days playing rugby, and I remember when I knew I was out of my depth, and we're playing against a reasonably strong team in London, and I was having drinks against the guy, my opposite man, and he was a South African guy. And what he was saying to me was, he's like, "Hey, bruh, so what medicine do you take, huh?" I'm like, "What do you mean medicine?" He goes, "For training, what medicine do you take?" I'm like, "To be honest, mate, rice, tuna, and an occasional Nando's." And he laughed, right? So he laughs at me. He goes, "You cannot progress if you want to do this. You cannot be clean." His message to me was, you have to be taking something. So I asked him what he was taking, and he was like, he was on, I think it was GHRP 6. He was on a mild dose of test, and he was like, "It just takes the sting of training, And I was just like, and I'm like, fuck, we ain't even getting paid to do this. And that's when you realize that this is, A, it's everywhere, but B, it took me back to, because I grew up in Southern Africa, it took me back to rugby in the 80s, and like you'd get to watch some of the South African games, and they always looked more violent than any of the other games, but they were banned from playing rugby against other nations until apartheid came down.
Yeah.
And for those first 5 years, the Springboks were crushing everyone. They were just stronger, more intense, more aggressive. And it's only when you start to read the behind the scenes things, they were doing what the East Germans were doing. But they had that cloak of just being banned from athletics. South African doping was more sophisticated than British doping in the 80s. It was unbelievable.
I have a contact who I think I told you off air, who is regularly in South Africa, and he has been for years, and with athletes, and so I knew about that, and you can see, I mean, when you look at South Africa as a nation, they don't when they especially, I'm speaking specifically in track and field, when they actually produce more, they produce higher amount of quality athletes than you would think they're capable of. And I think that is a testament to their doping program.
Yeah, they don't play around.
Oh, 100%. 100%. In fact, there were some substances which, and it still might be the case now, there were some substances, anabolic agents, which you couldn't get anywhere else but South Africa. So, that plays a part in it as well. And obviously, being Africa and you've grown up there, regulations are not so tight over there. You can get pretty much what you want. I'm Nigerian. Obviously, my parents are Nigerian. I've been back, so I know you can pretty much get what you want. That's not a problem. So it makes it. And you see, your story, you're not even getting paid, and people are doing that. So why would people think that the guys who are getting paid aren't doing that? If the guys who are not getting paid are doing it? That always perplexes me as to why people would believe something like that. Like so obviously, to get to the level of getting paid, you have to go through those levels of not being paid and work your way up. And so if those guys are doing it to get themselves up there, why would people assume that the people who are at that level and making money are not doing it? Because obviously they've had to come from the same level. And I never understood why people never logically thought about that.
Do you know what it is, Larry? I think deep down, people are so emotionally invested in their favorite athlete, their favorite team, that their mindset is they're just supermen or superwomen. They're freaks of nature. God has just given them something he didn't give me. That's what people want to believe. And I think what this podcast does, something like this does, what it does is it takes that idea and just puts a big boot through it and says, no, they are just like you. It's just that where you'd say no to drugs, they would say yes to drugs. Now, if you were to say yes to drugs and yes to the hell that training is going to be for you, you might be them.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. I mean, it's I think it's a lack of education as well, and I think because a lot of people, again, even nowadays, are of the assumption that if you take performance-enhancing drugs, you don't have to train as hard, whereas it's the complete opposite. You have to train harder to make use of these drugs. So I think that stigma needs to go. That myth needs to be extinguished amongst people in general. And I think a general understanding about performance enhancing drugs needs to happen for a lot of people to drop that notion that if you use drugs, you're a bad person. And because let's be honest, society uses drugs to enhance themselves every day. Like when people wake up in the morning, what's the first thing they do? They drink a coffee to wake them up. What are they doing there? They're taking a drug to enhance themselves. If you've got a headache, you're going to go to work. You're going to take an ibuprofen or a paracetamol. You're kind of enhancing yourself there. People are trying to put that world aside from their world when they do the exact same thing in their world, and try and justify it, with various excuses. So, it's going to take people thinking logically and objectively about this issue for it to really change.
So I had a row with a trainer. Let me not name him because he still trains fighters now, and it was it got quite heated about the drug thing because I've changed my view now. My view is actually fucking just let people do what they want, and so he got upset by that. So my question was, are you upset that it's against the rules, or are you upset that it's morally wrong? And he was like, oh, it's just morally wrong. And I said, but we dope in every facet of our lives. We embellish our CVs to get the job. We put filters on our pictures to appear better than we actually are. We lie to the world so often. We deceive so often to get ahead because we understand that everything's competitive. Why would you deny an athlete that opportunity? It doesn't make sense to me. And it frustrates me when fans say things like this because fans are judges in their own cause. They'll watch football and their player will dive for a penalty and they'll go, yeah, that's good play. And then they'll criticize someone for taking testosterone and you go, come on, you can't have it all ways. Come on, man. What are we talking about here?
Well, I brought this up in the barbershop interview that I did. When I mentioned that, why do people call performance enhancing drugs cheating, but gamesmanship where you will let one fighter train 12 weeks for a fight, no problem, and you'll get another guy, his opponent, who, you only give him 2 weeks notice How is that not cheating? And how is that not dangerous for the fighter who hasn't trained? But yet people want to jump on this bandwagon and say, oh, it's going to take a death and pick a death by someone using performance enhancing drugs for people to take this seriously and blah blah blah. Well, there's been many deaths. That theory implies there hasn't been a death in boxing. There's been many deaths in boxing. So that's nothing new. And on top of that, how many deaths have happened because one fighter has been allowed to train for a good amount of time for a fight and another fighter hasn't? Isn't that cheating? But no one will bring that up at all. Do you see what I'm saying? And then I also make the point that people like to say, again, there's a couple of boxers in particular that you probably know. I'm not going to mention their names, but they always like to say, oh yeah, as I said earlier, it's going to take a death, by someone who's using performance enhancing drugs for people to take this issue seriously. And I always come to this argument about that. Well, you're talking about someone. Okay, let's say someone uses testosterone and they get stronger, and they have a boxing match, and they in the commission of that boxing match, the opponent gets killed, dies. What's the difference between that and a boxer using creatine, which we know increases strength? There's numerous scientific studies on creatine improving strength. I've used it myself. You probably use it yourself. It works. We all know that. What's the difference between using testosterone and using creatine, which is allowed to augment your strength, and then going into that ring and then causing the death of an opponent? So which one is, so what's the difference there? And the people who always harp on about deaths in boxing, they can't say anything about that. No. The only thing that they can say is, oh, well, one's allowed and one's not. Well, who's the judge of what's allowed and what's not? I mean, they're both made in the body. Testosterone's made in the body, creatine's made in the body. So, again, what's the difference?
I don't think there is. I think
there isn't. There isn't a difference.
No, someone's arbitrarily drawn a line and said you can do this, but you can't do that. And that's always problematic because there's no real logic behind it. It's just we got scared by testosterone, so we're going to ban it. We got scared by GW1516. We're just going to ban it. Without actually trying to weigh it up against, well, does this give you more of an advantage than creatine would? Or does this give you more of an advantage than, a caffeine tablet would? No one ever really does that, and caffeine's not naturally occurring. But you're allowed to use it.
But you're allowed to use it. But saying that, funnily enough, they did ban caffeine for a while, but because it's in so many everyday items, they have to reinstate it. Same thing with, not same thing, but they were actually, when creatine first came out and all the studies came out that it worked, they were actually going to ban creatine. But then when they realized that you could get the same amount of creatine if you could eat a shitload of red meat, then they realized, well, who's to stop someone saying that they just get red meat? They can't tell the difference between the creatine in red meat and the creatine from a supplement. So there's no way for them to ban it.
And if you remember, when Wenger first came to Arsenal, there was a massive deal. Yeah, because he gave players creatine, and that was a back page headline. Wenger doping his stars with creatine to boost performance. And all these other managers were like, well, that can't be right. That's not fair. That's not fair. And I think Wenger's thing was, you could go and buy it yourselves, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, everyone's on it. But let's come back to football later, because it's not just creatine in football.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But one of the things I did want to say about 88, I found this tidbit really interesting because I read one of the books about the East German doping program. So they took a Ben Johnson cycle from, it might have been 87 when he did the World Championships. And I think he ingested about 2,600 milligrams of anabolic compounds in that month, which, that's about 650 a week or something like that, 650 milligrams a week, which isn't crazy. Well, by today's standards, it's not crazy. But they had an East German female, she might have been a javelin thrower, a shot putter, something Kriegler, who was on a bigger dose. So she was on 3,000 milligrams a month of anabolics, turinabol and so forth. And that's when you realize, Jesus, like there was so little science behind what was happening at this point. And that's why you're seeing a lot of the guys from like the 70s and the 80s, and actually it's coming into the 90s now. A lot of these guys are having health issues. Some of them are passing away before their time because not much was known back then about, you know, the downside of taking these excessive doses, because people just thought more is always better.
Unfortunately, a lot of the women suffered from that East German protocol because, as you said, the dosages that some of them got were equivalent to what a lot of the guys use nowadays. Especially, it was specifically oral turinabol, which is the state-sponsored drug of choice that was made only by the East Germans in their company Genopharm, I think it was. And it ceased to be made as soon as the Iron Curtain came down. So I've read a lot of reports that have been translated into English about what they were doing, and some of the dosages that they were giving women was just ridiculous. But they did learn, and as you said earlier, the East German protocol has influenced how everyone dosed today. Because if you remember, the East German women were killing it, but the East German guys weren't doing much at all. And we now know it's because oral turinabol is not a very strong steroid. Like Dianabol is a very strong steroid. Oral turinabol is a derivative of Dianabol, and it's not a very androgenic steroid. It's not very strong, even on the anabolic rating. So it wasn't that strong. And we now know that as men, if you are going to take an anabolic steroid, you have to take enough to replace your own body's testosterone and androgenicity, which oral turinabol couldn't do. And obviously back then they didn't really know about that. But with women, there's no such thing. So any anabolic steroid you use on women will work fantastically because they don't have the amount of testosterone that we do to begin with. So,
and they have hypersensitive receptors. Like female receptors will go crazy over the smallest doses. I was talking to a lady. She's a powerlifter, and she was saying to me she does a gram of test a year.
Oh wow, okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Just a 1 gram of test a year. She's like, look, I don't need that much. About 20 milligrams a week, and I'm good. I might kick it up if I feel I've plateaued, but she was like, no, it gives me all the benefit I want. And think how mind-blowing that is. 1 gram of testosterone over a year.
There's guys taking 3 grams a week.
Yeah.
You know, there's guys taking 3 grams a week, and she's on 1 gram a year. It just goes to show you how sensitive women are to these substances. You know, as you said, they're hypersensitive to it. They don't need a lot because they don't have the testosterone levels that we have. So we as men have to take enough to overcompensate for the androgenicity of the testosterone that our body makes endogenously. So as you said earlier, everyone in the world learned from the East German protocols. So we now know you can't just give oral turinabol by itself to men and expect them their performance to improve. That's not going to happen. Whereas the women, they killed it. I mean, is it Marita Koch still holds the 400-meter women's world record?
Yeah.
You know, I think she did that in the 70s. She still has that. You know, it's crazy to think of what they achieved, honestly.
And it's not like everyone's been clean ever since.
Yeah, exactly. So it just shows you. Well, again, look at FloJo's record. That's still there. just shows you what she was doing. Obviously, she paid the price for it in the end, but.
But they question that record now, don't they? They're trying to say the equipment was faulty.
Now but they knew. Listen, I had it on very good authority that because remember she quit right after she did all those two records.
Yeah,
she quit, and I was told that she was told to quit. You've had your time. You've overdone it. Now you need to quit because if you remember clearly, her was it her husband? Was Bobby Kersey.
Was it Al Joyner?
No, Al Joyner, sorry. But they were all involved. Bob Kersey, Al Joyner, they were all involved in the same training group.
Yeah.
And they were known to be involved in like growth hormone and obviously anabolics and stuff. So obviously they overdid it with her, and subsequently it led to her dying because she wanted to make a comeback just before she died as well. But yeah, it's crazy to think of what they were doing at that time. It's crazy because I mean, like we just said, those world records, the 100 and 200 meter women's world records, they haven't even got near that. Yeah. And remember, we're talking about the closest person that's got closest to Flo Jo's records is what's her name? She was also banned. Marion Jones. And she didn't even, she didn't even get nowhere near, but she got the closest to it, and she was doping. Yeah. So it makes you wonder what Flo Jo was doing on her day, and Marita Cox was doing in her day, because it's just ridiculous that with all the knowledge and the drugs that have come out since then, that record hasn't been touched. Even so far as to say, if Ben Johnson hadn't put up his hand and looked behind him 10 meters before the line, he might have run very close to what Usain Bolt has run.
Yeah.
Which would have been mind-blowing. I mean, the time he ran was mind-blowing for that time. But even, if he ran a 9.6, imagine that even up until now, that would have stood,
But look at it now, right? 9.79 now will win you a silver medal. If they do their testing properly, 9.79 will win you a silver medal now, or maybe even a gold.
Yeah.
That's how crazy it is. One of the stories I did want to touch on about the East German side was one of the things they never talk about, and one of the consequences of their doping program was because they were giving young girls, I think as young as 13, these sorts of doses, the number of abortions that happened in these East German sports schools were ridiculous because all they were doing was shagging like rabbits because everyone had these elevated testosterone levels that were just sneaking into each other's rooms and girls were getting pregnant. So one of the untold tragedies of the whole thing is the number of abortions that came as a result of, the doping program.
Yeah. Well, that still goes on to this day. I mean, I still keep in touch with quite a few athletes on the GB team and a couple of others on internationally, and that every Olympics it's like that. It's like that. So that yeah, you're right. But also going back to that, these German women, a lot of them also had to undergo sex change operations because of the amount of substances they were given as literally kids. Like you said, you're talking about 13, 14-year-old girls given anabolic steroids in high dosages. It ruined a lot of them. And I've always, while I'm a proponent of athletes using performance enhancing drugs, I've never been a proponent of women touching anabolic steroids. Because there's many other substances to use that won't involve you messing with your femininity, So I've never been a proponent of women using anabolic steroids, but obviously it happens, and it's not going to stop now. So
it's the Wild West now. It is the Wild West. So like in my rugby days, I remember we used to have a name for some of these women. We used to call them the 5 milligram girls because you knew they were on the 5 milligram Anavar tablets. You know when you can just see?
Yeah.
Yeah, you just see them. And you
Yeah.
just be like, do you reckon she's a 5 milligram girl? I was like, yeah, I think she is.
Yeah.
Because someone's just told them, look, you can do this and you can look as ripped as me. In fact, this is actually becoming established dietary advice. So it's not unusual on forums to see, on these all-female forums, someone will just go, I've got this thing called Anavar. Yeah, if you just take 5 milligrams every other day, it just strips everything off. Or they'll say something like, yeah, if you just put these estrogen blockers in, all the fat will fall off. And you're just like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Jesus.
Yeah. And we're not even talking about competitors.
No.
We're talking, like you said, we're just talking about women who just want to lose a bit of weight, put on a bit of muscle, and they're talking about using Anavar. They're talking about messing with their femininity, using literally a male hormone to lose a bit of weight or to put on a bit of muscle. Like I question the sanity of these women sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Because it's different for a man. I mean, you're just adding to your maleness. It's not, as long as you don't overdo it, it can actually be increase your health benefits. But with women, and especially women who don't compete, I like you said, I see that all over the forums, and I mean, there's so many other substances that they could use that wouldn't give them that the androgenicity that anabolic steroids can give them, and they still, for whatever reason, choose to go that route.
When the price of growth hormone drops to what you can get peptides for now, just watch how this world changes. Watch how this world changes, and there'll be growth hormone diets. There'll be all these sorts of crazy things. Like, when you can get pharma grade IGF LR3, and that's when they will become slimming drugs. I'm just waiting for the price level to become sensible. They will become the slimming drugs, and that's even worrying too, because of obviously effects on how your body naturally produces insulin and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, that's already happened because the price has gone drastically down, especially if you get pharma grade from like China. It's gone drastically down. So I already see, because good in the 90s, it was only the elite of the elite athletes in whatever sport that were using growth hormone. Now, even the every Tom, Dick, and Harry who's just walking into the gym wants growth hormone, and they're getting it too because it's that cheap now. So it's good. But you're right, it's going to get to the point where it's even cheaper than what it is now, and it's just going to be like you said, the HCG diet. Now they're going to have the HGH diet, and I mean, people in general are inherently lazy, and they feel, even though we know that it takes training with these drugs to get the benefits, they just think that if I take a little bit of this, I will get what I need from it without having to work too hard. And that's where the more is better mentality comes from. Because if a little bit helps them, then more is going to help them even more. And then it gets to the point where, diminishing returns and health is compromised.
And so one of the things I wanted to say, almost to box off the 80s, is by the 80s, we've got this mainstream. And it is, when you talk to the older heads, the guys who were around in the 80s, especially the Americans, what they'll say is the average man on the street knew where to get steroids. And it was just generally accepted. This is how you look big. This is how you get in shape. This is how you perform, and at a sporting level, is how people like basketball players were able to do 82 game seasons, because they had doctors that could in real time prescribe you these things. So even if it was an issue in terms of failing a test, you could say, well, is doctor prescribed? I have a condition. And one of the reasons we keep talking about athletics and boxing is that there were two reasons. One, I think athletics has had more of a light shone on it, but I think the things learned in athletics will easily filter into boxing. So I think if the top athletes in the 100 meters were doping, I think the top boxers were doping. And I'm happy to be challenged on that. Whoever wants to raise that as an issue can do so. And I also think they're the two purest sports because technology doesn't really help you. On the track, doesn't really help you. In the ring, it doesn't really help you. So you can track their progress over time. So that's why we're merging the two. And also, I think they're areas where we can have an informed conversation because I was an athletics buff growing up as well. So I think I can get to about 99, 2000, and then I forget who all the people are after that. But because we've looked at the Santa Monica Athletics Club, we know that they were a bit, they were suspicious. The Al Joyner camp, definitely suspicious.
Yeah.
And then the next big camp, and if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, was the John Smith camp. So I think that was Quincy Watts, Kevin Young.
Kevin Young. You had Akko Bolden, Morris Green.
Yeah. Tim Montgomery. Was he there? No, he was the other one.
No, Tim Montgomery was with the other guy who actually
Victor Conte.
He was. There was a coach who used to coach Trevor Graham. That's it, Trevor Graham. Yeah. Trevor Graham. Yeah. Because he's the one that actually ended the Balco Labs because he got jealous about what these people were taking, and he managed to get a sample, send it into the testers. And that's how they developed the test for an untestable drug.
But so the John Smith thing as well. And I can remember being a kid, and I watched. Was Butch Reynolds part of that as well? No.
Yes.
I was. Yeah.
I think he was. Yeah.
Because he's always my benchmark for doping. I always say that guy, who's considered to be the most powerful 400-meter runner we've seen, he did 43.28, doping his eyes out in 1988.
Yeah.
And then Quincy Watts ran 43.50 to win the gold medal in Barcelona. Yeah. Which is still my favorite run by any athlete ever. I'm a big Quincy Watts fan. And then you had Kevin Young with the 11,
Spider-Man. Yeah.
11 stride change down.
Yeah.
It was only him and Ed Moses that have ever done that.
Yeah.
And you look at that, and that record still stands. They haven't come close to that.
Still stands. No one's gotten close to that. Exactly. And this is again what we were talking about with the whole FloJo thing. Like, do people not think, with the advancements in training methods and diet and supplementation, do people not think that people should have at least gotten close to that by now?
Yeah.
So the obvious answer, is staring them in the face, and they don't want to admit it.
Yeah, and it's that 400 era. I always look at, and it was heartbreaking when you're like, I think they were all doping. Quincy Watts, when Butch Reynolds came back, obviously. Well, I'm going to put Michael Johnson in there because I suspect. I can't say for a fact. I suspect because that running style shouldn't be getting the results it does. Because if it was that effective, we'd all be running that way.
Oh, yeah.
So there was him. Who else was there? Antoine Maybank. Oh, geez. Digging out the classics at this point now.
Yeah. Because I remember one guy that I used to admire, but he wasn't around for too long. Tyree Washington.
Yes.
He always used to wear the headband.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that guy.
Yeah.
Was always number 3 in the 4x400.
That's it, yeah.
Because remember where the Brits were at this point, right? So you've got guys like Butch Reynolds running sub 44s for fun. Roger Black, Dave Grindley, Dwayne LaDeja, all struggling with 44.50.
Yeah.
There was a clear second. And I'm like, I'm sure these Brit guys are taking something. They didn't look like they were, but they did.
Oh, they were. If you remember, I can't remember his name, but before Roger Black, there was another British guy who was actually like the top British guy. He was actually one of the best top 10 in the world.
It was Dave Brindley.
And he got done,
wasn't it?
No, it wasn't Brindley. He actually got done for, I forget his name because he hasn't come up in years, but he actually got done for trying to ship in a whole load of anabolic steroids from Mexico. Wish I knew his name, but he actually went to prison, and he lifted the lid on what him and a whole load of athletes were doing.
So it's not Roger
But
Black.
yeah,
It's not Dwayne Ladejo.
no, it was before Roger Black's day. It was before Roger Black's day. Let me. I need to try and remember if I can.
We'll come back to that. That will bug me as well.
Yeah. But yeah. He was like the best before Roger Black came on the scene. He was the best in Britain, and obviously one of the best in the world. And everyone thought he was clean. And then obviously when he got caught with what he was doing in Mexico, and this was after he retired. Then he came out and obviously said what he was doing. Subsequently, while he was competing. So again, and if he was doing it, and then Roger Black broke his British record, I don't understand why people.
Was it David Jenkins?
That's it. That's the one. That's the one. Well done, you.
I had to dig that one
up. That's the one. I haven't spoken to him about him in years. That's why I can't remember. But yes, David Jenkins. So before Roger Black was on the scene, he was the number one 400-meter guy. And he couldn't get close to the Americans. And he was running like sub 45s. He was running 44, whatever. And everyone thought he was clean. And then obviously what happened with the whole smuggling thing happened, and then he came on record and just admitted everything he was doing. But everyone seemed to just sweep that under the carpet and was like, well, he's doing that, but the others weren't doing it, which was absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
Even the way Grinley came on the scene, like Grinley came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I remember, like, there was, the year before, I'd never heard of him. And then all of a sudden, he's there breaking a British record. I'm like, what?
But he came out of nowhere. There was a race where Michael Johnson had gone, God knows how many races unbeaten, and it was in Oslo. I remember watching this on ITV. And David Grinley's just started running in the home straight. Michael Johnson's chilling. He's like, nah, I got this, man. This is nothing. And David Grinley's just started barreling down. And even Michael Johnson was like, what the hell? And Michael had to just kick it up a bit just to win that. And then he disappeared, but he was always getting injured, if you remember. Like, he would always be those sorts of injuries where you almost have too much muscle for your skeleton.
Yeah. Well, that's another. Before growth hormone became mainstream, a side effect of anabolic steroid use is because your muscles get very strong very quickly. Obviously, your muscles adapt very quickly to whatever work you give it, but the tendons don't adapt as quickly. So you always tend to get tendon ruptures, which was the injuries that David Grinley always had.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of them, like Roger Black and all of them had. So that was a telltale sign of what they were doing at the time, because growth hormone hadn't become mainstream at that point.
So I think what we've done, and it's taken us an hour, but it's been good, because I think what we've done for the audience is we've set the scene, right? Because I want people to know that, because I want to almost parallel the doping tale with your athletic career, because I think you kind of kick into gear around the late 90s anyway, and I think we've hit that point. So we've set the scene. I think we've set the scene well, where we've said, look, even by the end of the 90s, you have to accept that doping was everywhere. There's no sport that's immune from it at this point. And if you believe that, you can choose to believe it, but it's not a sensible opinion to hold. And you've got to then remember that at this point, the genie's out the bottle. We know the whats, the hows, the wheres, the whens. We know everything now. So now we come to the late 90s, and you're a young athlete, and your sport of choice at this point was the 100 meters, right?
Yeah, 100, 200, occasionally 400, but 100 and 200 was the main one.
So who were your contemporaries running when you were coming up?
So Dwayne Chambers, I used to compete against Dwayne Chambers, but I say compete, but it wasn't very competitive, because even though I was running 10.7 at the time as a junior, which is very respectable for 100 meters. And I tell the layperson, and they were like, "Wow, you should be going to the Olympics." I'm like, "Yeah, but Dwayne Chambers at that time was running 10:1, and he had the world junior record." And people, I know you would know, but generally the general public doesn't realize that the difference between 10:1 and 10:7, even though it's only 0.6 of a second, in 100 meters, that's a world away.
You'll never close
that's
that
That's a
gap.
world away. Yeah.
I think you'll know this. If you're a 10:7 runner, you will never be sub 10. If you're a 10:1 runner, you will you will have to be terrible not to be a sub 10.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's ruthless like that.
Yeah. So even and remember, I was using stuff at that point. So I knew I wasn't going to make it as a top sprinter. I'd be a respectable sprinter, but I wasn't in it to be a respectable sprinter. So, yeah. And then I think I got I did get injured very badly. I broke my hamstring twice. And that's when I decided to make the switch to boxing. But before that, I mean, during the off season, the track off season, I used to go to the boxing gym with my brother and train to keep fit. And I was always encouraged by the guys in the gym to take it up. But obviously, my love at that time was sprinting. So it's only when I ripped my hamstring for the second time that I realized that. And remember, I'm in college at this time. I'm not working because I've got old school Nigerian parents who are like education. So I wasn't working. It cost so much to rehab my my hamstring. I just thought, I'm not getting the support. I need to move on to another sport.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How did you get to the point where you started doping? So what was that journey like? I almost want that journey from being a teenager who just ran and was reasonably quick to then becoming the guy that was like, this is what I have to take in order to get to the top.
So for me, I was always fascinated, as I said to you earlier, I was always fascinated by performance enhancing drugs from a very young age. I was very curious about it from a very young age. And I think from the ages, because I got involved seriously in athletics from about the age of 13. And that's when I started training at the track with a coach. And I've witnessed a few conversations between some high level athletes, and I probably wasn't supposed to hear those conversations, but
which club was it?
So Haringey at first.
Ah, okay. Was that where Tony Jarrett was from?
Yeah, New River. Yeah,
well remembered.
So that's where I started off, and then I went to Mile End Stadium to train because I moved coach. But yeah, I and that made me realize that doping was even amongst the level below world class. And then obviously the more you do the sport, the more you realize how widespread doping is. And then on top of that, I was doing my own research. As you mentioned, Dan Duchesne's book, I got that, and I read that with glee. It kind of made me realize that if I want to do something in the sport, then I need to take these substances. I also got I don't know if you remember the World Anabolic Review '96.
That's before my time.
Right. But that was another book after Dan Duchesne's book that really went in depth about doping and protocols and so on and so forth. So I managed to get these books, do my research, and I think when I came to the age of 18, I was like, okay, I am going to do this now. So then it took finding someone who was able to supply me with these substances. And then rest is history, as they say.
So is that through the Athletics Network that you found a supplier, or did you have to find one for yourself?
It was through the Athletics Network. Yeah. So basically, I don't want to mention any names because he's still a friend of mine to this day. But and I think I mentioned his name off air to you. But the guy that supplied me first of all was a guy that was supplying a lot of top athletes from all over the world. But he specifically supplied. Do you remember Jason Livingston?
Yes, that light skinned guy, was he from Bath?
No,
that's Jason Gardner.
Jason Gardner. Jason Livingston was a no-name sprinter who was running, I think, 10.5 before the 92 Olympic trials, and then he pulled a 10.08 out of his ass.
Wow.
And then he was tested. And then because he was on the team to go to the Olympics, and then he tested positive, obviously. So he didn't end up running in the Olympics, but he was down to go. So he went from 10.5 in one season to 10.08 because he came second to Linford in the trials. In fact, he pushed Linford very again, like you said about Michael Johnson. Linford had to go some in the last 10 meters to actually win that race. So yeah, the guy that supplied him supplied me.
Ah.
Yeah.
And we're talking mid-90s here, aren't we? Mid to late 90s.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
And so there's already a network in a sport that I think athletics was booming at the time, but it was still, it wasn't football, it wasn't rugby. It was just another sport which was televised. And it's that point we make to people. Like this idea that drugs are this thing that are miles away from you. Not true. In the right circles, it's just there. It's an open secret. No one even pretends.
Yeah. Because the thing is, and it's more pervasive now. But the thing is that most athletes will think that you're doing it as well. This is why it's called an open secret, because even though it's not talked about openly, like in the media, oh yeah, I'm using this and that. Most athletes know that other athletes are using, and if they do happen to get friendly with another athlete, that conversation will come up at some point, and then they will exchange, what they're doing and so on and so forth. So, this is, in athletics, you see it with a lot of guys who change training groups. This is why it's frowned upon, especially nowadays, because obviously you're taking the trade secrets to another group.
Yeah.
But and the same goes for boxing. To be honest with you, you're going from one coach to another, or you're going from one strength conditioner to another. You're taking the trade secrets with you. It's one of the reasons why when Floyd fought Pacquiao, who did he hire? Even though he badmouthed him and said he was giving Pacquiao drugs, Alex Ariza. There you go. Yeah, it is. As you said, it's an open secret amongst athletes in every sport. Again, another example. You only have to look at the cyclists, see the whole story there. With Lance Armstrong and everyone in between, and what they were doing, to see that everyone knew what everyone else was doing, and it's just part of the course.
It is. It comes down to this question, isn't it? What price are you willing to pay for success?
Yeah, bottom line. You see, it goes back to what I said earlier. Athletes, when they're doping, or when they're thinking of doping, they're not thinking of morality, or I need to play fair, but all they're thinking of is, I need to provide a decent living for myself and my family. And if these substances are going to help me do that, then I'm going to take these substances. That's it. So when someone, and I've heard a few boxers jump on their high horse and be like, oh yeah, well, I wouldn't do it because, I like to do it properly the right way. And no one gives a damn about that. And doing things the right way is not going to pay your bills. it's not going to pay your bills. So yeah, you carry on with that attitude, because most other athletes who are in this game are not thinking like that. And it's funny because, ever since I've been caught, and I still get these questions to this day from boxers specifically, when I go into gyms and train, because I still train in gyms now. But I get a lot of boxers coming up to me, well-known boxers as well as small hall boxers. What do you think I should take, or do you think it's worth me doing it? And some of the well-known boxers are well-known anti-doping anti-doping advocates, but privately they're saying to me, yeah, I even had one guy who I'll probably tell you off. Well, I will tell you off there when we finish this. I had one guy who I was training in the same gym as, who's very well known in this country. Wasn't a world champion, but very well known, for world titles. If I could get away with it, I would do it, but I don't feel I can get away with it. So that's the only reason why he didn't dope, and I believe he didn't dope. This person in particular, I believe he didn't dope. Or more than likely he didn't dope, should I say, because I don't 100% believe anyone right now. But yeah, he came up to me and he said, if I could get away with it, Larry, I would do it without question.
I think I know who it is, but we'll speak about it off air.
Yeah. But it's and then I get other guys, and other guys are coming up to me, especially the small hall guys, and they're like, should I do it? Should I do it? And I'm like, look, I can't advise you to do it or to even not do it. I said, you need to make your own decisions. You're an adult. You need to see the lay of the land, and you need to make an informed decision. And that's all you can do. You need to make an informed decision and not listen to certain rhetoric over here. But at the same time, don't think that, this, if you take them, that it's going to give you guaranteed success, because nothing's guaranteed. It can only aid you, but how much it will aid you, no one knows, So
it comes back to the thing that bodybuilders always say. Bodybuilders will say this, right? They'll go, look, if you took all the drugs away from bodybuilding, Ronnie would still win, Dorian would still win, Flex might win a few, Kevin DeVrody might. Basically what they were saying was the same people would win, because the people you see there aren't necessarily the people who took the most drugs, because the drugs are freely available. You can take as much as you want, run yourself into the ground. It's who can train consistently with heavy weight and high intensity the most. And steroids can enable that, but your genetics will dictate how far you can go with that. So Ronnie Coleman would win with or without drugs. So is the example. Lance Armstrong would probably have won with or without the drugs. And I think people forget this. They think the steroids are a shortcut. No, the steroids are literally, from the way I understand it, it's, look, I'm doing 100 units of training a month and I'm giving it everything, but my brain tells me I can do more. At that point there, you're probably ready to, dabble. And then you should be able to just fly away from other people. But you're seeing people in the gym now, they're benching 20 each side and they're like, yeah, I could do with some Deca to build my strength. And you're like, you haven't even tapped into what you're capable of.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of that in boxing. A lot of people in boxing, I had a podcast last week where I said it. Most boxers are lazy and they're looking for a shortcut to get to that world title. They don't want to put work in. That's why, to be honest, it's a sport that I say to people, if you can avoid it, because you're dealing with people who don't really want to work for it. They're not very self-directed, and I think that's one of the challenges. But we're just to bring it back for the audience. So we're at the point now in your life where, in terms of you now understand doping, you're probably one of the more knowledgeable people, probably at the time, probably in sport on how you do this. And then you step into the world of boxing. So when you step into the world of boxing, from a PED doping perspective, what do you initially see?
So you've got to remember also that by that time I also have my degree in pharmaceutical chemistry. So you're right, I probably was one of the most knowledgeable people in sport at that time, not just in boxing. Um, so stepping into the boxing world, even as an amateur, I knew what was going on as an amateur. I remember I had a conversation with a super heavyweight at Repton called Damien Campbell, and I'm going to mention. I don't like naming names, but I'm going to name his name because I'll tell you why in a minute. So I remember I had a conversation with him during a training session where he was like, "How did you get so rich?" And you know me, I put in lots of work. I watch my diet, and which isn't lies. You know, it's true. And then he started coming to me with all these names of all these anabolic steroids. Like, what do you think if I take this and I took that? Nah, he was one of these lazy guys. He had loads of talent, but one of these really lazy guys. So I said to him, listen, you need to sort out your work ethic first before you indulge in any of this. Do you know what I mean? And I didn't let him know what I was doing, but obviously they all suspected, and again, open secret. And if they asked me, I wasn't going to deny it, because some people did ask me, and I told them what I was doing. So it wasn't hidden. You know, if people did come up to me, I would say in the club. But yeah, so this particular super heavyweight then came up to me with all these names. So obviously, if he's obviously done research to come up with all these names. So now I don't know if he doped or not, but who's to say he didn't dope? Because obviously he asked all these questions. He wanted to know how I got my physique. He's coming up to me with all these names. Obviously, I didn't give him the information that he wanted, but he probably got it somewhere else and probably did his thing. Now, he didn't get anywhere because he turned pro, but didn't do anything. But again, this just shows how pervasive it was even in the amateur level. So and the thing is, coming into boxing as an amateur, I knew a couple of amateurs who dabbled. I wouldn't say they were big users, but they did dabble in performance enhancing drugs. So and again, you had a lot of guys who were cross training with athletes in the track and field world. So you hear things, you see what's happening. You got the same suppliers, you know who's using what. So going into the boxing world, even as an amateur, I knew what I had to do.
So what was being used back then?
So it was mainly anabolic steroids, because I think at that point you were talking about when I came into amateur boxing, we're talking about 2005. Growth hormone was still quite expensive. EPO was still very expensive. So you're looking at your anabolic steroids, basically. Your anabolic steroids, and if you had the money, you could indulge in growth hormone. But I think EPO.
Yeah, because I was going to say, at that time in rugby, 05 in rugby, you had your test base with one other. Now, it was normally a hardener because testosterone gains are quite wet gains. You carry a lot of water, but you need something that's going to dry you out. I think a Tren will probably dry you out. And then you had GHRP 6, GHRP 2 that were being used to give you an additional growth hormone spike.
Yeah.
Later on, you then move to something a bit more sensible like ipamorelin. I know some guys were on the sermorelin.
Yeah.
And then you had EPO. And that was what rugby players were generally talking about. In terms of your training cycle, on game day, everyone was on some form of ephedra supplement. Now, depending, were you on 25 milligrams or 75 milligrams was the only question. But the problem with that, and I'll hold my hand up and say, I've tried ephedrine before, and I took 2 25 mil capsules. I had to play 2 games in one day, which is why I did it. And I ran like hell for 2 games. The problem was I couldn't sleep. And then people don't realize this. You wake up the next day and you're in bits because your body's not used to recovering from that kind of workload.
Exactly. I don't know if you remember also, another side effect of it is that, and that they use it now for that, is you didn't feel like you wanted to eat at all.
Nah, not at all. Yeah.
Yeah, your appetite was just completely gone. And that's why a lot of people using it. I've used it as a diet aid. And in fact, it used to be sold in fat burners as a diet aid until they banned it. Because obviously a few people were silly and had heart attacks with it. But yeah, it's a very, very good diet aid as well as a performance enhancing drug. I remember I broke a few personal bests not only in the gym but on the track with ephedrine.
Because you remember, I tell you where I got it from, how I learned about it. Do you remember Solomon Warisa got done for Up Your Gas?
I actually know. Well, I used to know Solomon quite well. And an interesting prescript for that story. And I'm very friendly with this guy, and I actually see him now and again, even now, in Ilford. But guess who gave Solomon that Up Your Gas?
I have no idea.
The well-known British athlete,
John Regis.
Dalton Grant. Remember Dalton Grant?
The high jumper.
Yeah. It came from Dalton. Dalton's a really cool dude, by the way. He's so cool. And I only say that because I think it's quite common knowledge amongst athletes anyway that he gave it to Solomon Warisa. Yeah. But that's where it came from. Yeah.
And I think like I was doing A levels at the time when I did the ephedrine thing, and then like that's lived with me forever. I'm sure I have a bottle here somewhere, just in case I ever have to lace the boots on again, and I feel tired. I'm like 50 milligrams, man. We're in, because but it comes back to the point that there are no secrets in this thing, man. It's just about whether you're in something where the stakes are high enough for you to take something.
Right.
That's how I look at it. Like if I'm just going to play rugby, or if I'm just going to jump in and do 4 rounds with Dominic Akinladi like the old days, I'm not going to take anything for that because I'm like, I can get through that comfortably.
Yeah.
But if you tell me there's 50 grand on the line, I'm like, I can't take any chances. Mindset will change.
There you go. And you just proved my point. When it comes to and this is why this issue is never going away from sport, ever going away, because money talks. Money talks. Wherever there's money on the line, you're going to get people willing to do whatever it takes to get it. And remember, we mentioned in the past about people doing it without having money on the line. So if that's the case, think about what other people who have money on the line are doing. And what people who are trying to get to that level are doing. And this is why it kind of does annoy me occasionally when I think about how people are not really comprehending what's going on and just, having their heads in the cloud, basically. Despite everything that's gone on over the years, and all the different scandals and so on and so forth,
And the thing that frustrates me is because I think we've reached an interesting point, because I think what you've done now is you've shown that it was there in athletics, it was there in the amateur scene when it comes to boxing, and that doesn't surprise me because I see people now when I watch amateur bouts, I watch them and I go, that doesn't feel like what I'm used to seeing over 3 rounds, and you see it. Look, I've had people come in my gym, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't think you're clean. But I have to train you because you pay your subscriptions and you're a member of this club and you box for this club. But I'll look and I'll go, I don't think you're clean. And then what happens subsequent to that, when they step away from the sport, and now there's no moral compass or anything like that, then you start to see the weight come on and you're like, okay, right, okay, there you go. Now you're being who you are. because let's be honest, Larry, if we look back at the people we enjoyed watching box, how many of them failed tests? Holyfield failed. Roy Jones Jr. failed. Antonio Tarver failed. James Toney failed. Shane Mosley. Shane's an interesting one because I remember Victor Conti doing the video going, I showed Shane how to inject EPO. No. Don't believe anything Shane says. He did this. And you know if someone's taking EPO, that's the end of the line. That's not even the first thing they've done.
No. You need to be in the game a while to progress to EPO.
Yeah, and I look at all these guys, like, people forget Vitali. The reason, I think, I never know if this is an urban legend or not, but the reason Vladimir Klitschko did the Olympics was because Vitali got pinged.
Yeah, and that's not an urban legend. That's was documented. It's true. That's absolutely true. And this is why I when people tell me Vladimir's clean, I'm like, really? Well, if his brother was using in the Olympics, why would you think he was clean now? And an interesting story about Vladimir and David Haye in the David Haye fight. I actually did some security for David Haye in the press conferences to those fights. So I went with him to Germany and the press conference in London. And I heard an interesting conversation between Adam Booth and someone else from Vladimir's side, and basically the gist of it was that there was going to be no testing for that fight. And then I questioned Adam on that. I said, "So what? There's no testing?" And he was like, and he laughed, and he was like, "No." So make of that what you will.
Wow.
And I don't mind saying that because that is the honest to God truth. That's what I heard. Now, I'm not saying that David used. I'm not saying that Vladimir used. Although if you ask me what my opinion is, I'll tell it. I'll tell you my opinion. But I'm not saying they used for that fight. But
what is your opinion?
A world title fight and there's no drug testing. Yeah, thumbs up.
But a lot of people, young boxers look up to, or young fans look up to, or any fan looks up to, a lot of these guys have used, and I am sure, and I think that list was non-British. So I'm now supposed to believe that the British guys are the ones doing it clean. I'm a big Frank Bruno fan, but someone needs to explain to me how he got to 247 pounds. Like, because his debut weight was nowhere near 247 pounds. And Frank was a big guy back then.
Yeah.
And,
exactly.
These red flags, I say to boxing fans, look for the red flags. Because
exactly.
Frank when he retired, he was about 17 stone 10, 17, 11, I reckon, when his fighting weight was. Frank can't be more than 15, 10 now.
Yeah.
Now, I've met Lennox, and Lennox boxed at around 245, 250 pounds. Lennox is still a big guy now.
Yeah, he's still. Lennox is one of the few that if he told me that he didn't use, I could believe it. I could believe him. He didn't show any signs of using.
Nah, him and Riddick Bowe, I just look at and go, I just think you guys were just big men.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. If it turns out subsequently that he did use something, I wouldn't be surprised. But I could believe that Lennox was clean. He's one of the few that I could believe. As you said, Riddick Bowe as well. Yeah, definitely. Those are two guys that I could definitely believe were clean. Yeah.
The other guys where you watch, and it's easy with heavyweights, I think, because you just watch what happens to them when they retire. Like, there's some where it's almost like you've just taken the air out of them.
Yeah. But I also think it's interesting that you mentioned about Frank's starting weight and what he ended up being. And we all know there's a certain heavyweight that has similar traits to that. Well, I'm not going to mention any names. Feel free to mention if you want. But
have we discussed them before?
No, we haven't.
Thank God.
You see, here's the thing, and being a former heavyweight myself, I can attest to this. The training that you need to do as a boxer in general, and as a heavyweight boxer in particular, is so draining, especially with the cardio that you have to do at such a big weight, that you will tend to lose weight unless you're actively eating in a calorie surplus. Now, if you're eating in a calorie surplus and you're putting on weight despite doing all this training as a heavyweight boxer, your weight is not going to be pure muscle. Your weight is going to be a mixture of muscle and fat. So it's a very suspicious, and you could see it even from my physique when I was boxing. You could see it there. It's very suspicious when heavyweights are able, despite the huge amount of training they're able to do. I mean, with me, no one saw me as an amateur, so it wasn't as clear cut for me. But there's certain other fighters where they've gone from amateurs, like say they've weighed 220 as an amateur.
Yeah.
They started off 225 as in their pro debut, and despite doing more and more training as they need to do as they get up the levels, they're able to put on not weight that is not just muscle and fat, but pure muscle. That's impossible to do.
Well, maybe it's possible if you were to win a gold medal.
Possible.
Maybe winning a gold medal gives you that kind of it unlocks your genetic potential. That's the key. Like none of us have gold medals.
Maybe. And now I know you know who I was referring to when I mentioned about the analogy with Frank Bruno. So yeah, there you go. Now again, like I said, I know, and you being quite a big guy yourself, you know that it's impossible. I mean, this is why bodybuilders take anabolic steroids during their cutting period to get ready for competition, because they know if I cutting down, I need to hold on to my muscle mass because I'm going to lose muscle mass. Therefore, if I'm eating in a surplus yet doing all this training and I put on weight, if I'm not taking any anabolic steroids, it's going to be a mixture of muscle and fat, more fat than muscle, in fact. But obviously, if I'm using anabolic agents, it's only going to be muscle, because if I'm doing all this extra training, that's burning all the fat, and the anabolic steroids are retaining and building my muscle. So
And there's another element to this that people ignore. Your skeletal mass seems to determine how much muscle you can put on. So the working science at the moment seems to be, for every pound of skeletal mass you have, you can pack on, they reckon, 2.25 pounds of muscle, roughly, or 2.5, depending on genetics. So if you've been training your whole life and you've been lifting heavy in an elite environment where you've had the best of everything in preparing yourself for maybe an Olympic tournament, just being theoretical now. If you've been doing that as a super heavyweight and the heaviest they can get you is 104 kilograms, that's probably the limit of your skeletal mass, because visually you don't look like you have big bones.
Yeah.
You look like you have quite an athletic frame where you should really be running around 16 and a half tops.
Right.
That should be. So to see someone then drift into the 17, 12, 18s and still look ripped, then you're saying to yourself, okay, if I'm to believe this, then maybe your skeletal mass increased. If your skeletal mass increased, what caused it to increase on what is a mature body? I have a question to ask. And then I'm like, okay, then what was the trigger point for you to increase your muscle mass? Bearing in mind, in an elite environment, you were training your nuts off at that point there. It just so happened then you really did have random drug testing. So you had to be on your toes. You didn't have control over those variables. Whereas once you have control of those variables, the mass seems to go up. There are questions to ask, and I'll leave the fans to make their own opinions on these matters, but it wouldn't be the first time.
Just to touch on, because you mentioned round the clock random testing. People are of the opinion that, That's the gold standard. You know, there's no way to get around those tests. And I'm here to tell them that fortunately or unfortunately, there is a way to get around it. Now, what people don't seem to understand with the testing protocol is, even though they say round the clock, they have to give you what's called rest time. So between the hours of, I think it's 11, depending on which organization, because there's WADA, there's, UCAD, whatever. Depending on the organization, between the hours of 11 p.m. and either 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., they can't come for you to test you. So, and the cyclists were the first ones to develop this protocol of microdosing. So basically, what you would do in that time period was you would take the very fast acting compounds. So you're talking about your growth hormone, because that'll be in and out before the morning. You're talking about your testosterone suspension, that'll be in and out before the morning. You can take your IGF, because they still can't test for that. So that you would take all the fast acting stuff, even EPO you can take, and that'll be out before the morning. And you're able to take this in dosages also that wouldn't show up in a test, most likely, even if they did come within that period of time. So obviously it's not the ideal protocol, because obviously you're limited to the amount that you can take and the drugs that you can take, because obviously you have to take only fast acting drugs. So your decas won't do in this scenario, but you can still dope and get some benefit. So for instance, testosterone suspension is in and out of the body within 2 to 3 hours. So if I take that at 11 o'clock at night, by the time 6 o'clock in the morning comes, that's out of my system. They will never be any the wiser. Growth hormone is the same thing. But in fact, growth hormone is in and out of the system within the hour. Within the hour. The same for EPO. They have no test for insulin. They have no test for IGF. So as you can see, it's and we're not even including all the designer steroids, i.e. Balco Labs, that can be done, if you've got the right chemist and a good amount of money.
And so, just to follow that point, don't you find it interesting that Team GB seem to have this link up with, I'm never sure I think it's the University of Sheffield, not the Sheffield Hallam, but they have a link up with their biochemistry department.
Oh yeah. Oh, that doesn't surprise me whatsoever, because any good team will, and it's always done under the guise of, oh yeah, we're doing research to make sure that we know what the body needs and blah blah blah. Listen, we know what the body needs for years ago. Like, there's nothing new in this much. What you're doing is making sure you test these guys to make sure, one, the protocols are going well, and two, to make sure they don't show up dirty in any test. That's the bottom line. I know this because I was told by a very prominent athlete, British athlete, that 2012, a few months before the 2012 Olympics, I think it was either UCAD or someone from the anti-doping organization came to the elite British athletes and said to them, look, you are going to be tested within this period of time. So whatever you're doing, make sure you're clean by this time. Because obviously, as I said to you, when a country hosts, like LA in '84, when a country hosts an Olympics, they want to make sure they're kicking ass in that Olympics. That is exactly what GB did in the 2012 Olympics.
Remember Barcelona? There was that guy, Fermin Cacho. Did he run the 800 meters?
Yes, I do remember him.
He was rubbish before. He was rubbish after. And in the Olympics, this guy won a gold medal.
Yeah. I know the way he won it as well. It came out of nowhere. Literally, the last 50 meters, he came out, and if I remember the race correctly, he came out and won it.
Yeah, and you and everyone was like, I can't believe who is this guy?
Yeah, but it's crazy. It's crazy, and again, this is why this issue is never going to be resolved unless they allow, as you said, athletes. And I subscribe to your way of thinking that they should allow athletes to use performance enhancing drugs. But with me, I subscribe to Charlie Francis' way of thinking about this. For people who don't know, Charlie Francis was Ben Johnson's coach, and very smart man. And he said that, look, the ethos of the anti-doping organizations all around the world is to A, create a level playing field, and two, A or B, protect the athlete's health. Now, we know that there is no such thing as a level playing field. There is no such thing. It's a fallacy. I mean, you've got athletes who are more genetically gifted than other athletes. You've got athletes who've got more money than other athletes, so they can afford better equipment, better training facilities, better coaches. So there's no such thing as a level playing field. That's a fallacy. So if everyone has access to performance-enhancing drugs and are allowed to use them, that then levels the playing field. Because also you have individual genetic responses to these drugs, which could be better than others. So again, it levels the playing field. Then, if you only allow the athletes to use the hormones that are naturally made by the body, so then you're talking about testosterone, growth hormone, and EPO. That's it. The rest are not allowed because these have a good clinical safety profile and they're made by the body. So you then protect the athlete's health because then you can monitor the athlete's health markers. And then what you do then is if their health markers, like, your liver enzymes are too high, you can ban them for that. And then you can make sure that they come back healthy. So that way you protect the athlete's health and you create a more level playing field. I mean, it'll never be level, but it'll be more level if that sort of scenario happens.
But I think the risk is the cheating is so efficient and so effective, you're effectively trying to bolt the stable door after the horse has bolted. Like I think the first thing you have to do is you have to sort out the testing. Like, there's no point in saying we're an anti-doping body when so many people are getting away.
Yeah,
and I think we talked about this earlier. The worst, if I'm sat in UCAD, the worst thing that can happen for me is that we catch Joshua doping. Like, I would just say to people, listen, don't bring me that problem. Please do not bring me that problem because we've only got this much money left for the rest of the year. Okay? Yeah. And I do not want that court case. So whatever you need to do to make sure that he's clean, you go and do that. And I know it sounds, people say, you're just being negative. I only used him because he's probably the most bankable star in boxing. You could substitute him with Fury, Eubank Jr., Dillian. It doesn't matter to me. I don't want to catch any of these guys because it's just going to be so expensive dealing with them.
Well, we only have to see what happened with Dylan's case to see that's true.
Yeah. You make enough noise as a lawyer. Well, and contrast it with Liam Cameron's case.
Right.
Where Liam Cameron was done for recreational drugs and given 4 years.
Yeah. For what the experts themselves said was a tenth of a line. Because what he was saying was that he took it inadvertently. So he didn't know that he was taking it. So and they said that because of the amount, his story is probably plausible, but they're still going to ban him anyway.
He didn't have lawyers. Had he had someone who says, do you know what? I'm going to see this case through till the bitter end, he'd be boxing now.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look at the Tyson Fury case. They were so worried about being bankrupted by Dan Sport with Fury that they settled.
And they hadn't banged to rights. But you know what?
Yeah.
everyone laughed at me when I said, like, the instant I found out that he had popped for Nandrolone, I said, this guy's going to serve a shadow ban. They'll make out I was like, there'll be all this drama around him. He won't be fighting. He'll be doing this. He'll be doing that. He's just serving a shadow ban. And then they're all going to shake hands at the end of it and go, right, you can go back and box now.
Yeah.
Because, like, just some of the messages I received around that situation was, it wasn't a case you could fight and win. You were literally just hoping you could make enough noise that UKAD would just go, we can't be bothered. And it looks like Dillian's camp learned from that and went, get the lawyers in early, flood UKAD with lawyer letters that come in at 200 quid a pop. Bang, 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 bang. Until you go, listen, we can't afford this. We need to find a way for it to go away.
Yeah.
And it's sad that we're there. But then let's go back to Operation Puerto in Spain, right? When they found the cyclist, the doctor in Barcelona, he was in Barcelona, wasn't he? The doping doctor, and he had all the blood bags. So they raid this guy's practice. They get all these blood bags, and there are a load of cyclists, which we expected. But what was very strange about that was the first people to go for the injunction were the Real Madrid lawyers and the Barcelona lawyers.
Yeah, exactly.
Immediately. You cannot publish the names of the samples that were discovered. Even now, WADA cannot, essentially they've gone, right, we've tested them, we know what's in them, we cannot tell you who's got what.
Yeah.
Because the lawyers said, nah, this isn't for public consumption. You weren't looking for these footballers.
Interesting postscript to that story as well. Guess which tennis star also put an injunction in about that? Which came out.
Rafael Nadal.
And have you seen subsequently to that, his performance has dived and his physique has dived as well.
Yes, and he's been getting more injuries.
Yes.
But don't forget who his uncle was. His uncle was Miguel Angel Nadal, who was a centre-half for Barcelona. So it's not new to him.
Yeah.
You see, and these are the things people don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about the fact that there's doping in football. And we didn't even touch on it in boxing. One of the things that's happened in boxing actually is people now just have therapeutic use exemptions.
Yes.
That's what's happened. That's where the doping's at now. It's in the TUEs.
Yeah.
So
that's how a lot of people are getting away with it. Yeah.
So to be an elite athlete right now, as a male, you need to suffer from hypogonadism, you need blood pressure issues, you need a weak heart, and if you've got asthma, perfect. You also need a low red blood cell count, ideally. These are the things you need to be an elite athlete.
Yeah.
Now pause for a second and remember what the kids at school who had that stuff were like at sport.
They were the ones that always got picked the last.
But now they're world champions. None of this makes any sense.
It doesn't compute at all. At all.
And so boxing fans don't like, I sit here and I go, if you just look at our time in the sport, if someone said to me Calzaghe doped, I'd nod my head and go, it wouldn't surprise me. I can't be definitive because he never failed a test. It doesn't surprise me. Enzo Macronelli failed a drugs test, and they have similar styles and a similar high output style. And Joe carried that into his late 30s.
Yeah.
So I have question marks. Ricky Hatton, from fat to fit in those timescales, and he'd always say, I just worked super hard. And I'm looking and I'm like, nah.
Yeah, I have no doubt he used. I have no doubt whatsoever that he used. I've heard some stories from very credible people, and no doubt in my mind that he's used.
See, and I wouldn't be surprised. And he's one of the nation's darlings when it comes to boxing, but I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. And I know it means life's going to get awkward for me at boxing shows, but I'll stand by what I say. I wouldn't be surprised if Carl Froch was, the beneficiary of some research chemicals. And then the heavyweights, pick whoever you want. The answer is yes, in my opinion.
Yeah, pretty much. pretty much.
Because, and you'll know this because you're, being a bigger guy, there's a certain load that you just cannot do in a sustained manner. Your joints won't let you.
Yeah.
The road work, the skipping, the shadow boxing, the dipping, slipping, rolling. Like when you're heavy and you're carrying a lot of muscle, those are very violent movements, and you have to rest. I've been around big guys my whole life in terms of playing rugby. I know what 17, 18, 19 stone guys get like when they run too much or they exert too much, right? They're not the fittest of people. They are not the fittest of people. And after an exertion, they need a rest. I remember I was at, and I'll say it because I was at the Harlequins end of season do. I got invited because a friend of mine used to play. And I remember this. And everyone's just drinking their beers. And they were just telling stories. And there was a story about how one player discovered the other player's vials of growth hormone in the bathroom cabinet. It was a secret cabinet. It wasn't even like the office. It was a secret cabinet. And then that's when you're like, this is everywhere. But UCAD don't want to catch those people. They don't want to catch a Premiership footballer. They don't want to catch anyone that has enough money to cause havoc because they have to live within their means.
Yeah.
So what they look for, let's catch someone where there's a little bit of name recognition. It might be the individual or it might be the club. A little bit of name recognition, and it shows we're doing our job. We don't want anyone too big, just someone here.
Yeah.
Like the one time they got Linford. They got Linford when he was a coach.
Yeah, exactly. When he was semi-retired. Yeah, he did it. Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, then you're like, why was Linford doping anyway? That was my question. I was like, what?
Yeah, but Linford, and I know this because of the circles I was in when I was in track and field. He was quite vain because he was quite a big muscular guy.
Yeah.
And obviously he wanted to carry that into retirement. So hence why he would, and he still looks in good shape now. So it wouldn't be surprising if he was still doping now. But obviously that was the reason why he was still doing that at that time.
So I want to come back to this statement that Hearn got offended by, where you said 90% of pay-per-view boxers are probably doping.
Yeah.
Why? This guy put on a heavyweight card where I don't think there was anyone clean on there,
thank you. Thank you.
And that was pay-per-view.
That was pay-per-view. Now you see, this is why I laugh when he made. I mean, he obviously thought that would have been the end of it, but even from the comments on Twitter, everyone realized that he was full of shit. Because as you just said, he's put on. He's talking about pay-per-view fighters are clean and blah. He's put on a guy who's tested positive twice in Povetkin against his golden boy, and now he's going to put him against his number 2 heavyweight, right? He's put on another guy who tested positive twice in Lucas Brand on pay-per-view on pay-per-view shows. Numerous people. He had Jarrell Miller. Everyone and his mother, even Stevie Wonder, knew what Jarrell Miller was doing before he got popped. You can't be that big and throw that many punches per round and not be on anything. So, for me, Hearn wants deniability, but he knows what's going on.
He had Luis Ortiz,
But there you go. Another one. So
Kid Galahad.
Again, this is, yeah.
Billy Joe.
He's down on you know what I mean? You can reel them off.
He's collecting. You know what it is? It's like he's collecting dopers, isn't it?
Yeah. You know what I mean? And again, I ain't got nothing against these people. You do what you want to do. But if you, as Eddie Hearn, are going to be an anti-doping advocate, but then you're putting on guys who have not only failed the test once, but twice, you didn't need to be questioned about whether you're really about anti-doping or not. You know what I mean?
No. But if you remember when Dillian had his issues with UCAD, And Hearn would just refuse to talk. And my question at the time was very simple, because he'd always go, it's a legal matter. And I'd pause and I'd go, wait, it's not a criminal matter because no laws have been broken.
Exactly.
For it to be a civil matter, he would have to have failed the A and the B sample, and he'd have to be banned. Otherwise, there's no legal matter to answer. Someone would have to initiate legal action for it to be a legal matter. No one seems to have initiated any legal action. Therefore, it's not a legal matter, which means, Eddie Hearn, you can talk about it. It is not under any restrictions. And you see, the fans bought into this because no one asked the question, what legal matter is it?
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know you've got a background in law, because a lot of people conflate what goes on with the anti-doping rules with law, and they're completely separate. Because in this country, you can use performance-enhancing drugs as long as you're not trying to sell them. They are legal for you to possess and use. So, legally, there's no problem. So it can be talked about, like as you said. And again, you would know more about this than I do because you have a background in law.
Everyone gets scared because they get letters, right? They get letters that you can't say something. And the thing about the letter is designed to scare you. What you should actually say with the letter is, well, on what basis are you making the statement? Why can't I say anything? Oh, well, what you've said means that people could reasonably infer the identity of my client. And I'm like, no, you're saying that because you know who the client is and what they've done. The other person over there doesn't necessarily know. So it wouldn't pass that test. And I've had it before where I've just written back going, you have to show me the test that you're applying, and you have to show me the instrument that you're relying on. You haven't done any of these things. You can't just send letters intending to intimidate because I will charge you for my time too. And then, like I said, it just goes quiet because they go, actually, I think he knows what he's on about.
It's funny you mentioned that because obviously I've been very vocal lately about the deal that UKAD did with me when they took and I would say illegally because it was my property, my legal property. They took 3,000 D-ball tabs from me. And at the time I didn't really think, I just gave up because they said they signed a contract with me, a consent order that when I retire, I will get those back. So I retired. I asked them for my pills. And they were like, oh, we need to find them. Then they were like, we've lost them. So I said to them, well, I need compensation for that. At the moment, they're refusing to compensate me, which I am taking legal action over.
What were you going to do with 3,000 D-ball tablets?
Well, this is what I would like to know, what they've done with it. Like, so I have... so obviously, I've been very vocal about this, as you've seen on The Guardian... newspaper on the barbershop show and obviously on your show. I've been very vocal about what you could have done. Then I get an email a few days ago from their solicitor from Bird and Bird saying, well, these matters are confidential and you signed a confidentiality agreement in that contract, so you cannot be saying this stuff. But I've ignored that because at the end of the day, part of that confidentiality contract states that you have to give me back my stuff. You've broken your side of things, so I've not got any. I'm not obligated to then fulfill that part of the contract because you've already broken it.
So it's the whole thing about it's all about primacy of contracts, isn't it? So if you sign an agreement with UKAD that says, "Look, I will retire, but you got to give me my tablets back," then they have to do that. Unless the only defense to that is to go, we had a reasonable suspicion that he was going to take them and then come back and box again. But even then, that doesn't give them the right to get rid of them.
No.
And so once the contract isn't performed to its terms, the confidentiality agreement only covers the nature of the previous agreement. So you can't have a confidentiality agreement to talk about a contract that was never performed. So you're allowed to talk about it. You just got to dare the geniuses at Two Birds to sue. You don't have the budget right now. That Dillian stuff took money out of their pocket. They don't have the money.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt.
Yeah, if worse comes to worse, we will crowdsource legal brains and we will challenge them because where are the tablets? That's all we want. Is where are the tablets, or where's the compensation? Afterwards, we're going to ask you, Larry, what did you do with the 3,000 tablets? I don't even know how long that cycle is. That's like a 10-year cycle.
Well, they're 5 milligram tablets, so it's not like they're it's not as voluminous as it sounds in the terms of cycling. I mean, that's a few cycles worth. Don't get me wrong, but yeah.
Because another thing I wanted to touch on was, I don't know if you ever saw this, but Mia St. John came out in public. I think this was last year, and she basically said, "Look, I doped as a female boxer. I doped," and she said, the people in my circle were also doping. I'm not going to name names, but the people in my circle were doping. And I think it just takes a boxing fan with a couple of brain cells to go through her record and see what cards she was on to understand who was in her circle. The first thing that happens is Steve Bunce does an article just shredding her character. Like shredding. A woman who had 65 fights. Let's be clear about this. 65 professional fights. Think about it. You're going to shred a woman who's had that many professional fights. You're going to shred her reputation as a woman and as a boxer, all because British boxing said, Steve, you've got to circle the wagons. And I remember when we were discussing this, a guy called Nigel Travis, he's an amateur coach at Manchester. He was trying to convince me there are no drugs in boxing and that's all there is, end of. And I was thinking to myself, I'm sure there are guys in your stable that are on stuff because I've heard things.
Yeah.
I've heard things and I've been in camp with some of these guys and I'm not convinced that they're clean. But I'm not convinced anyone's clean anymore in any sport. Like we talked about Wade Van Niekerk and like people, we need to be honest as fans. And I say this, I just love watching freaks. Now, I have no concern for their health. I have no concern for their well-being. I'm paying a ticket to watch freaks. It's why I can watch powerlifting. It's why I can watch strongman. Because no one's trying to pretend that they're clean. I'm like, nah, you guys are freaks. Like, this isn't natural, but I'm being entertained, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. We love watching freaks. I want to see a heavyweight champion being 17 stone and ripped. I'm like, yeah, okay. It's like, when we used to watch the World Wrestling Federation with the Ultimate Warrior.
Exactly.
And we were like, yeah. But you knew you couldn't get like that. Yeah, I want to see the freak. And we all need to be honest as fans and say that. So you were right. 90% of people on pay-per-view doping? I'd say so. Let's go through the biggest names in boxing. Canelo. Popped.
Yeah.
That's a matter of fact. There are enough suspicions over Joshua now that it's going to get hard for him to go his whole career without, questions still being asked. Right?
Yeah.
Tyson Fury. It's a matter of public record. Who else is a big name? Dillian White. Popped. We're now not saying there was nandrolone in him, which is a strange. With all the sophistication in doping,
it was Debo.
Was it?
Yeah, it was Debo.
Wowzers!
It was Debo. Yeah.
Were they your tablets? Is that where they were?
Well, you'd have to ask Candy Dopin about that. You'd have to ask them about that, mate.
But we're going through this list now, and so you're like, okay, so everyone's popped, like Jesus Christ, there ain't no stopping us now, is there? God, so even the guys in the 90s. If someone told me, and I'm not casting aspersions, but if someone said to me that collection of middleweights and super middleweights of the 90s were doping, I'd probably believe that too. I'm just so jaded now because of what I've seen and what I know. I remember I got a text message from a girl I know, and she's a rugby player, but she's done a few white collar fights, and she was basically telling me that she had to go to the doctor because her whole hormone system just collapsed. And she had to go and be honest with the doctor. And she was telling the doctor that she was taking Winstrol.
Oh my God.
So she's taking Winstrol. I can't remember the dosages, but she's taking Winstrol and she's taking ipamorelin as well, so as a growth hormone peptide. And so I'm thinking to myself, is this happening in boxing as well on the female side? Because if it is, God help us.
Yeah.
Because you look at some of those physiques, right? And I go, they look like the physiques of the female runners who are popping anyway.
Right.
So and we come back to the whole thing, what we said before. What I see in athletics is normally mirrored in what I see in boxing.
Yes. Yeah.
So now I look at the female boxers and I'm like, who's actually clean? Because there's certain gyms and they'll say to you, look, you're talented, but your strength's low, your stamina's low. And they'll go, well, what do you want me to do about that? I do all the road work I can. It's like, that's not enough. And that's when you get the invitation to the dark side, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
you have to do something about it. What do you mean? You have to do something about it. Okay, what would you like me to do? That's better. And then and then you get given your medicine, you get given your schedule. This is what you have to do and when. And I suspect what happened with Dillian was he got his days wrong.
Yeah.
That's what I suspect. He just chose the wrong day to eat steak. It happens. But I think the female side of doping is the one that worries me, because in athletics I think it's well understood and well managed. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's better understood than sports like rugby, and definitely better than sports like boxing. Because I wouldn't be surprised if they've got the women on male type microdose cycles going, yeah, well, if it's good enough for him and he's lighter than you, you take it. And I can imagine that's happening.
Yeah. And with the influx of female boxers in this country now, and the fact that it's becoming more popular, hence more money, you're going to see an influx of women doping, and then women probably getting caught as well. Which I think in the years to come, people are going to see that more and more.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be a surprise, because, like we've said, if you're in the right circles, you're almost surprised everyone else doesn't know.
Yeah,
because it's so brazen. It is literally like, well, you try this. I've been at a rugby tournament and I've seen a bottle of Anavar drop out of a bag.
Oh, that's funny. That's hilarious.
And poor girl, she played rugby for Ireland actually, and she was like, no, I just dropped my supplements, and I was like, no, I know what Anavar is, right?
A little bit more than the supplement.
Cut the bullshit. Now look me in the eye and just pray that I don't talk to people about this, because I've seen this with my own eyes.
She probably thought that you're using, so she probably didn't care.
Mate, not with the belly that was hanging out at the time, mate.
Wow.
Mate, you know what? I survived that tournament on just experience. I just put myself in the right places. I was like, there's going to be no running in this tournament. Live off experience.
Experience, yeah.
So
it matters.
Just to, because I think your career is fascinating, because you came out of a gym where, if you take a snapshot from 2009, the heavyweights in that gym, everyone's kind of had vastly different careers, right? And I don't want to name names. The audience can research for themselves. Of that camp that you're a heavyweight in, was this knowledge being shared?
But you say camp. You mean when I was trained by James Cook?
Yeah, so just that environment. So not necessarily the camp as in you're all in it together, but everyone's kind of around each other.
Yeah. I have to admit, it wasn't. In my case, it wasn't. But I think that's only purely because there was no central guy doing the protocols for everyone. I was doing my own thing, because obviously I had the knowledge to do that. So I didn't have to involve anyone. So I think purely because of that, not because I think any of the guys were clean. I'm not saying they weren't clean. I'm not saying that they were doping, but I don't know. But what I'm saying is that I didn't share any information with them, because I just thought it wasn't necessary, because I'm doing my own thing. I'm using my own knowledge to further myself. But I do know that they knew that what I was doing. They knew. I mean, I remember, James Cook has been in this sport for years. And I remember him holding the pads for me, and he goes, he stopped the pads for a minute, and he said, "You know what, Larry? Do you know that out of all the boxers I've trained, you're the only one that's able to move me backwards when you're hitting these pads." And he will say certain things like this, and then he wants to turn around and say he didn't know, he didn't have an inkling that what I was doing. That's hard to believe.
And then from your perspective, did you ever offer advice to boxers? So did you ever go, look, if you've got a fight coming up, here's what you want to do? Or were you just like, nah, it's not my thing?
Yeah, I always steered away from offering advice. Again, I always told people to make their own mind up, because here's the thing with me, because of the knowledge that I have to realize that that people might not be as healthy as I am. So therefore, they might have health problems, which means that they can't use certain things. They might have high blood pressure. They can't use Anadrol, for instance, which increases your blood pressure like mad. They could have liver problems, which again negate using any oral steroid. They could have diabetes, which negates them using growth hormone. So I always stayed away from giving people advice. I'd always tell them to go on the internet and do their research. There's plenty of information out there nowadays. So I always tend to steer clear of that, because I never want to put myself in a position where someone hurt themselves and then they could blame me.
No, 100%. See, I get that, because we've never really had. I think we've kind of had it on a small scale. So I know in the Northwest there were certain gurus when it came to stuff like this, right?
Yeah.
And they're known, and a lot of the top boxers from that region use them. And I've heard them interviewed on other podcasts, and those questions weren't put to them, but that's okay. And I don't know if you have that kind of knowledge in London, but I know definitely in Yorkshire there are guys who provide that knowledge, and I've heard mud slung at the Ingle camp before, which you kind of normally say, it's just rumours, but then Kid Galahad failed, so you got to ask yourself, and Billy Joe did when he was up there as well. So you got to ask yourself, what's going on up there? I've always thought Wales is just a drug problem in every sport.
Oh yeah.
Wales is just it lives by its own rules. Like the stuff that goes on in the valleys is insane. They probably have the best cycles because all they do is dope. Like whether you're
there's nothing else to do up there, is there?
So they're probably experts. But we've never had these guys like we haven't had a British Heredia yet. We haven't had a British Conte yet. We haven't had a British Ariza, or even if you want to go further back, like a Mackie Shilstone. People forget what Mackie did with Evander.
Yeah, with Larry Holmes, yeah.
Holmes, Evander. They forget and they forget Evander and Lee Haney were best friends for a while.
Yeah, I have plenty of stories about that, in fact.
God, listen, the floor is yours.
Because a good friend of mine, Terry Dunstan, has sparred Evander. In fact, he sparred Evander when he was getting ready for Lennox. And it was actually Lee Haney that introduced Terry to ephedrine. And that's when I found out for sure about Evander using EPO. Because if you remember, there was a thing about Evander having some sort of heart problem. And then all of a sudden that went away. Because it wasn't heart problems, he just overdid it with the EPO and his blood got too thick. So his heart found it difficult to pump it around.
Yeah, because he kind of retired for a bit, then unretired.
Yeah, exactly. Just took a break, let the red blood cells clear his system, and he was good to go again. So and then there was the whole Evan Fields. Do you remember that whole thing with him?
Evan Fields, who lived in exactly the same house.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And had stuff sent to him. Yeah, exactly. So, we all knew what uh, uh,
Holyfield.
Holyfield was doing. And in fact, Holyfield, not only did he have Lee Haney, he also had. Do you remember Dr. Fred Hatfield?
Yeah.
Also had him as well on his team. World champion powerlifter. So
are we?
yeah.
Yeah. Are we surprised when you?
But again, this just talks about the cross training that I always talked about. In fact, not only he also had Kurt Angle on his team. Just because Terry told me, because when Terry used to train with me, he used to do a lot of wrestling with me as well, and he got that from Holyfield's camp. This is why Holyfield was so strong in the clinch.
Wow.
Because he worked with Kurt Angle during wrestling, and to lower his center of gravity. And yeah, this is why he was so strong in the clinch. I mean, you only have to watch him when he was fighting Tyson to realize how strong he was in the clinch. And not even that, when he fought Bolt, he was so effective in the clinch.
Yeah.
Even though he was a smaller guy. So yeah, it's I've heard some stories from Terry about that.
Where is Terry Dunstan now?
He's training. He's training different clients. I think he trains some people for. He's some of the footballers for Swansea. I think he's actually the strength and conditioner for Swansea football team. And he trains a whole load of private clients in Ilford. I forgot the name of the gym. But yeah, he's doing well. He's doing all right for himself.
God, I haven't seen him for years. I remember once I showed up at Repton, just randomly. I was like, I haven't trained all week. Let me just pop in. And I think he was the only guy my size in the gym. He's like, I would do a few rounds. I didn't know who Terry Dunstan was at this point. and a lot of people won't know this, but you got to go back and watch Terry Dunstan fights to understand what I mean when I say this. There was no point in me even throwing punches. I was like, I'm hitting air right now. So my best bet is just to cover up and just wait for the bell, right? Let's not be stupid here. And
we've all been there with Terry.
there are only two people, like big guys, where I'm like, I'm wasting my time. He's one, Dominic's another. Where I'm like, I'm just wasting my time being here. Like at least just let me hit you. When you get to that, you're like, what are you getting from this, man? Just let me hit you. At least get some benefit from it.
Oh man, yeah. Terry was one of the most talented boxers not to win a world title in this country. Definitely. I mean, a lot of people mention Curtin Lang, and obviously he is one. But I think a lot of people forget about Terry when they mention Curtin. Because I'm not disputing that Curtin wasn't the most talented boxer to not win a world title, but Terry's definitely up there. I mean, he almost did win a world title. I forgot who he fought, but he was winning every single round when he fought for the IBF world title, and he then got knocked out in the last round. It's
But you see,
so it is.
And what I love is I think that Holyfield story exemplifies one of the challenges. When boxers get into camp, it's the analogy I use is it's like a terrorist cell, right? Everything happens in the group, and then when that group is done, it doesn't spread. So whatever doping knowledge is in this group comes back together for every fight. And that's why you see the top guys tend to keep the same people around them.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
You've got to keep people happy for a start because they can talk. And two, you want to know that you can just slip straight back into it, right? This is what we have to do. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. We've done it before. Bang.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone's immune from this. I don't think, the greatest boxer of our generation, he's probably there. The number 2 guy, he probably took something. The Golden Boy probably did. But all of these guys, the heavyweights, most of them probably did.
Yeah.
And we're watching a lot of them now, these 40-year-old guys. And, at that age, you can't fight for 12 rounds. Because, number one, you can't be bothered. People ignore the psychological effect of when you've done something for long enough, actually, you get to a point where you're like, I really can't be bothered. I imagine
Yeah.
Povetkin's like that. And so they have to
Yeah.
get him into a state of mind where he's not like that. And, you know,
Yeah.
people underestimate the uses of drugs like Ritalin among elite athletes.
Oh, yeah. Modafinil is another one.
Say that again?
Modafinil is another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I remember Kelly White, who won the world championship in 100 and 200, I think 2001.
Yeah.
She got caught with modafinil.
No exemption, no prescription.
Well, she tried that was her excuse, but then they found the whole training group was soaked with modafinil, so that didn't wash.
And all this stuff, like, your Ritalin drugs, this new whole thing of nootropics, and now if you look where the research is going now they're trying to find plant compounds that can give you similar effects to what the PEDs give you. So I know there's one that they're trying to get from the tomato skins of green tomatoes called tomatidine, which they believe might have anabolic effects. But they haven't been able to synthesize enough of it yet to really try. Or the holy grail now, the myostatin inhibitors.
Oh yeah, the myostatin inhibitors.
And that's where it's all headed now. It's all headed to, let's find new ways of doing it. So people.
But we know where the next doping sort of. What's the word I'm looking for? The next big thing in doping is gene editing. We know that now. We know that athletes have done it already, but they just can't test for it.
But also, I think the challenge with that, and my knowledge of genetics is limited, but we may think something codes for, say, muscle growth, but we won't have all the elements that code for muscle growth. So we'll just see, okay, these 7 genes are responsible for muscle growth. But it may actually turn out that the trigger for those might be another gene further down the sequence. So you just edit these 7 genes and ignore that one, and it can cause problems all down the chain. So it's...
You're not wrong, but as you know yourself, athletes are going to do whatever they think is going to help them.
Agreed.
And if someone says to them that we can use CRISPR to edit your genome and give you, I don't know, more type 2 muscle fibers so you can be more explosive, they're going to do it. They're not even going to think about the consequences or and for me, that's where I draw the line. Because again, like you just said, we don't know the consequences of this. There's too many variables at play. It's not the same as using a performance enhancing drug, editing your genome. It's just not the same.
No.
So yes, they can't test for it, but the possible negative outcomes are too numerous to even comprehend.
And it's a worrying place where we're headed with that, because I simplify things. So when it comes to athletes, I always have a 2x2 box, and one axis is natural capacity and capability, right? Are you naturally fit? Yes or no? And then the other one is just response to training. Right? That's how I measure everyone. So you will meet people and they're naturally fit, whatever that means. But they can, you'll notice being an athlete, there are people who can just run barefoot in a pair of shorts and probably do 10, 2 in the 100. And you're like, I don't understand how. Yeah,
they haven't trained a day in their life,
They can just run. And then you get those sorts of people. Now, you also get some people who can't do that, but their response to training is so high, they close that gap in no time at all.
Yeah.
What you're really looking for, people who are naturally fit, naturally capable, who respond highly to training. And then they're the people that if you are going to have a PED program, you put them on it, because that's where they'll just leave everyone for dead.
Yeah.
All these other people who are low base level capability and low responders to training are wasting their time. The drugs aren't even going to help you.
But you see, but there are outliers to that, because Ben Johnson was probably an outlier, because you got to remember, Ben Johnson, before he jumped on the PEDs, was a 10-4 guy. And even though he didn't have a drastic improvement over the space of a year or so, he made steady improvements with that until he got to where he got to. Now, if you're talking about a 10-4 guy, you would never expect a 10-4 guy, even with drugs, to be able to run 9.79. So there are outliers. Although you're right, what you're saying, there are outliers, genetic outliers, because there are some people, and I think I'm one of them, because I've never needed a lot of an anabolic steroid to get a massive response. And I'm the kind of person that even creatine, like I go on creatine, people think I'm taking steroids, because the response I get from creatine is just ridiculous. It's nuts. Even I sometimes, like, I'm baffled. But I'm the kind of person that if you've got a supplement and you want to know if it works, let me use it, because then you will see very quickly if it works or not. So, I think I'm an outlier in that respect. And so, like I'm saying, you're generally very correct, but there are genetic outliers there where their genetic response to drugs are so that it can even bump them up past the guys who are even more genetically gifted naturally, Because if you look at, I'll give you an example. If you look at, again, going back to Ben Johnson, if you look at Ben Johnson compared to, say, Carl Lewis was naturally the better runner. You could see any technique. He was naturally the better runner. He flowed more. His transitions were more smoother. But this is why I think Charlie Francis is a genius. He took what Ben Johnson had, which was that explosive start and that quick transition acceleration into his running, and just improved on it. And he improved his technique slightly, but what he did was he decided, right, I'm going to improve his power to the point where he's so much more powerful than everyone else. Technique isn't going to matter that much. I mean, the guy, if you read Speed Tracks, the guy was benching 180 kilos. And he couldn't have weighed more than 13 stone, if that. Ooh. He was benching 180 kilos. That is ridiculous strength. And it's funny because when you watch that, I've watched that race even now. When you watch that race and you see his shoulders, and because Charlie Francis had a theory which turned out to be true in the end, that if you get your shoulders really strong so that they can power your arms very quickly while you're sprinting, that will dictate how quick your legs move. Because everyone used to think it was the other way round. And they've done research to show that, yes, that's actually the case. The shoulders dictate how quick your legs move. And if you watch that race, and any other race Ben Johnson's been in, you'll see that that's what he concentrates on. And that was what Charlie Francis fought in. So, Carlos was naturally the better runner. But I feel like the improvements Charlie Francis made to him, plus the drugs, then just moved him up that level that Carlos couldn't get to, even though he was on drugs.
That's mad, isn't it? Because I've literally just run that race back in my head to think that we're still seeing guys run 9.79, and Ben Johnson ran 9.79, almost cruising towards the end.
Yeah. And he did that, so we're talking about over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
No, hold on. What am I talking about? Over 4? Almost
30.
No.
Yeah, it's about 32.
Yeah, over 30 years ago. Yeah. And over 30 years ago. That's nuts. And like you said, cruising. He could have run 9.6 if he didn't slow down. Looking behind, not even for he looked behind him with his hand up. It's nuts. And that's for me. That's why he's my top sprinter of all time, because that run I mean, the run he did the year before in Rome when he broke the world record and he ran 9.83, that was phenomenal. But you could see he was motoring all the way to the line. So, and it's very similar to what Bolt did when he broke it in London. And he was slowing down, looking. He kind of emulated Ben Johnson in that sense. Yeah, it's just crazy. It's crazy.
And do you buy into the Usain Bolt myth?
What, that he's clean?
Yeah.
Hell no. Hell no. And if anyone wants to argue with me about that, feel free. But you have to, people need to understand that out of the top 10 guys, the top fastest times in the world, he obviously Usain Bolt's at number 1, and he's never tested positive. From number 2 to number 10, they've all tested positive at some point. So either people are trying to tell me that drugs don't work, which we know is bullshit, or Usain Bolt's on something. It's either one of the two, and we know drugs work. You know what I mean? So, people need to get their head out of the clouds, really. And listen, that doesn't take, because you see, and I think you touched on this earlier, when we say things like this, that's not to take away from the hard work the man's had to do, because drugs or not, he's had to work his arse off. In fact, with drugs, he had to work his arse off even more. So that's not saying he didn't work hard for it. Of course he did. That's the whole point, That's the whole point of taking these drugs. He did work hard. That's not negating his hard work. But he couldn't have worked hard without those drugs.
You can't get the volume in. I think that's the thing people don't realize. There's a certain training volume to deliver these freakish performances in whatever sport. It can be powerlifting, it can be boxing, it can be football. To deliver at that level, the volume of training you have to put in would break your body if it was just normal.
Yeah.
And it's one of the arguments they have for the Tour de France, where they say, look, the Tour de France is so destructive to the human body that doping actually keeps the riders healthier.
Yes. There was a couple of Tour de France guys who said that you need drugs to finish the race. Forget about winning or come in top 10. You need drugs to finish the race. That's how brutal the Tour de France is. That's how brutal that competition is. You need drugs to finish the race. That's crazy.
And then so now you're looking at a 12-week camp at world level on pay-per-view. May I add? Now look at the volumes you need for that. You're training 2 or 3 times a day. You're sparring God knows how many rounds. Let's say you're doing 100 to 120 rounds. The human body is not designed for that.
Exactly.
It's not designed for that, because if you go back to the old timers, people go, well, look at the old timers. But the old timers just pretty much fought, ticked over. They didn't have specific camps because they were fighting so regularly.
Yeah.
So actually, those 120 rounds that people do in sparring in camp, they were doing a large part of that just fighting. And so it took the strain off the body, because...
That's actually true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's why, if you look at American trainers now, American trainers value activity over training. Because they're like, it's a better way for you to get your rounds, and you don't have to do as many rounds. But because I look at these guys and I see what guys are doing in camp now. And, I've tried it before. I had some time off. So I shadowed a former heavyweight champion. And I was like, look, I'm going to do what you do day by day. I got about 4 days in. I woke up on the 5th day and my body was just like, nah, stop. and you're getting those aches and pains you've never had before. So like your hips hurting, your ankles, and it's not even like the bones in your ankles. It's like the little muscles that stabilize. Like, well, these pains don't make any sense. And I'm like, someone does this for 12 weeks. I'm like, it's not possible. It's not possible. And I'm tired of hearing I'm super fit. I'm just a genetic outlier. No.
Even a genetic outlier, we're not robots. So you might be able to handle a slight more volume than someone else, but that's only slight. you're still going to feel it, and you're still going to regret if you don't have any support via PEDs.
Yeah.
And this is what I was telling. Because I remember when I first became a pro, and I was working a full-time job at the time up until I got my Southern Area title. And so I would train in the morning before work, then I'd work, then I'd travel 2 hours to the gym to do another training session, and then go home and then rinse, repeat. I told someone that if I didn't have the drugs, there's no way I could have done those. There's no way I could have done that. 6 days a week. There's no way I could have done that. Absolutely. To work a full-time shift. I mean, we're talking about some boxers can't do that, and they don't even work full-time. They just boxing. And even with PEDs, they can't do that. And people think I could do that and work in a full-time job? No frigging way. No frigging way. There's no way I could have done that without PEDs. And this is the problem that a lot of boxers who are not at the top level or nowhere near the top level and are just starting out face. Because we all know that very few boxers actually earn a living through this sport. So they're in that dilemma. And again, this goes back to what I was talking about, where boxers don't care, for the most part, about doing things properly, doing things morally. And again, even that's a stupid statement, because everyone has different morals. Just because one person has these sort of morals doesn't make them the right morals. That's your morals. Someone else has a different set of morals. That you know what I mean. But you know, their primary aim is to feed themselves and their families, and to do it the best way possible, like to earn as much as possible. So they're going to do what they need to do. And this is why, even to this day, again, when I go to boxing gyms to train, I get it from especially the guys that are fighting on the non-TV shows, who have to sell tickets to get a fight, and sometimes don't even get paid because they only sell enough tickets to cover their opponent. They asked me what they should do in terms of performance-enhancing drugs. You know? But if you were to talk to these people away from the gym, they'll be like, no, we don't believe in performance-enhancing drugs. No. Yeah. But the reality is they want to further themselves in the sport and earn money. And that is a way of them to do it. So they're not, you know, and that's why people, it really annoys the shrimp boxers come out with, oh, I want to do it the proper way. No, that's not, and those same boxers, I'm quite sure, 9 times out of 10, if they were given, if someone came up to them, like if Al Heyman came up to them and said, right, I've got a fight for you, but I want you to use this, and this, and I'm going to give you £2 million. They'll be so quick to jump on that. It's ridiculous.
It's all window dressing, isn't it? Let's be brutally honest. The anti-drug rhetoric's window dressing. When I hear people making noise on social media about drug cheats, it feels like they're protesting a bit too much.
Yes.
And, you know, I'll hear guys like Bellew talking about, it's disgusting, it's fucking disgusting. Why would you do that to another human being? And they get really moral. And then I look and I go, I know how you were boxing in your mid to late 30s. And I have questions. That's all. I have questions.
Yeah.
But I would never judge you negatively for doing it. I just want you to be truthful with yourself and truthful with your fans.
Exactly.
I was going to ask you. Are you plugged into anything happening at GB? Because we all forget about the Muhammad Ali situation where he failed his drugs test. And first things first, I know from experience, if a kid, and Muhammad Ali was I think he was about 20 at the time, if a kid goes into a gym and says, I want to take steroids, right? Go into a hardcore gym, everyone in that gym will go, mate, you're growing now, like you're doping now without even taking anything. We wish we were you, right? That's the general view that people will have. Like, mate, we wish we were you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they'll say, come back in a couple of years when your body's done all of its growing. Then, yeah.
Mm.
So I was like, if no one in a hardcore gym would have suggested that, where did he get this idea? Because I think he fell for Trenbolone. Which,
Wow, the big boy stuff.
and the thing about Tren is you don't take it on its own because I think it would just shut everything down.
Yeah, you need to take it with test.
Yeah, so so we know for certain there's a test base. You've got your Tren there, and it's starting to feel a bit like the cocktail the Russian guy had in Icarus, isn't it? So now I'm like, was there some Anavar in there as well, or did they give him something else? But now it's looking very sophisticated. It's like you were on something that someone's created for you. You're at GB 4 days a week. So where are you getting this knowledge from? And he was never allowed to speak, if you remember. He was never allowed to issue a statement. And then the thing is, what GB should have done at that point, which they didn't do, you'd have just tested everyone and gone, we want to make sure that the problem's not here. So we're going to test everyone, and we're going to go to the public and say, look, our athletes are clean. They did. They just shut up shop. And it's almost as if it was like, well, this guy nearly ruined it for us.
Mm-hmm.
And my suspicions were confirmed, Larry. I'll tell you when they were confirmed. It was when someone left the GB setup. I'm trying not to draw too much attention to the name. Someone left the GB setup, and we're having a brief conversation. I said, why? And it was like, they were asking me to sell my soul. I didn't delve any deeper, but I read into that there's a price being asked here that someone's not willing to pay. And it can't be a training thing because I know the work ethic.
Yeah.
So then I was like, this is all you've dreamt of. Why would you come back? And that seemed to be the undercurrent. Like, they're having you take things you shouldn't probably take.
Yeah. That is not surprising to me. Because even though I don't have an insight into the GB setup, I have heard from the grapevine that it's a lot like the cycling setup. And you've noticed how with just like GB boxing, British cycling has gone from not being able to place at the tour to winning the tour back to back in a short space of time, which never happens.
Yeah, and we've gone from literally being rubbish at international amateur boxing to suddenly being a powerhouse. Because we had Audley, then we had Amir Khan, and they're one-offs. Yeah. I still believe if Audley boxes an amateur now, he'd probably medal at the Olympics because he was just designed for that.
Yeah,
Amir Khan designed for the amateurs, and he was designed for that clicking system. So I can see how they won. I can kind of guess how De Gale won, but it was when 2012 hit. Well, for that run up to 2012 and then into 2016, and we ran away with it. But then what happened? People saw what GB were doing and said, we need to do the same thing. Now all of a sudden that gap's closed again. And it's no coincidence. And it can't just be, if we build a dedicated facility, it's suddenly easier. It's like, no, boxing's a very simple sport. So what's really happening here?
Yeah. Exactly. It's a tried and tested method that, like you said, is started with the Soviets. It gone down to the East Germans. The Americans did it and still doing it. Brits are now catching up and now doing it, and now the other countries, China is also doing it. So yeah, they're all at it.
But you know what's really interesting about China is 80% of people from that region have the gene, and I always forget what it's called. It's like a UG871 something. Basically, they don't hold the metabolites from PEDs.
Oh.
They don't fail tests.
Right. That's interesting, and that comes from that. See, this is where this whole gene editing thing comes into it, and in a country like China where anything goes, because if the government says, right, you're doing this, you're doing it, otherwise you're in trouble. and we're not even talking about jail. You're going to get killed. You know, take this or you're getting shot, and your whole family's getting shot. You're taking it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
and you don't pop for it. That's absolutely insane. So they're confident 80% of Korean people will never fail a doping test because there are the metabolites don't stay around. Because, you know, the normal test is they don't necessarily find the substance, but they'll find the metabolites. So they'll find the signifiers.
Yeah.
If they're not in your system, you don't fail the test.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, right? Based on the knowledge that I have, especially from my degree, a lot of the techniques that you see employed in sports, they've already been because they have to come from somewhere, right? They already before they come into sports, they've already been tried and tested in the military. So a lot of the stuff and techniques that are being used now, they've already and a good example of that is SARMs. So I think you're aware of all the SARMs that's going on at the moment. You know,
Rad 140.
Exactly, because they were being tried in the military first, and then they came on the scene, I think in Beijing, and everyone took them because they couldn't test for them at the time. So it's amazing how you see the transition from military into sport and then into the general public, because now the general public are all about SARM.
Yeah, because they assume they're risk-free, but we still don't know.
Exactly. They're still too new. I mean, they're doing clinical tests on them, but you know, I mean, if you compare them to anabolic steroids, which have been around since 1950 and have thousands upon thousands of tests on them, they're not. The safety profile just isn't there with SARM. So, but people will take them anyway.
Yeah, people will take anything for an edge now. It's absolutely crazy. But look, I'm just conscious that we've done 3 hours, so
I'm sure we could do 3 more
easily. But I always like I said at the beginning, I wanted to do an episode where you can always refer back to it.
Yeah.
And I think we've done that. I think we've done drugs in boxing better than anyone in this country's done it.
Yeah.
I know you on that. I know you on the barbershop thing, and the sense I got from that was they were asking fan type questions.
Yeah.
Not really looking for the layers, because there are many layers to this. It's not as simple as you're doping, therefore you're cheating. There's a complex journey you have to go through till you get there. Like for a lot of people, it's never as easy as, I just took them and I loved it. I agonized for a while, but I knew that if I didn't take them, I wouldn't get to where I wanted to get to. And a lot of people feel bad for doing it. So if you look at female bodybuilders, I find it interesting how short their careers actually are. Because, like, if you look at the physiques now that are on stage, like, you know that's not 5 milligrams of Anavar. That's everything. That's the kitchen sink.
Oh, yeah.
And there's only so long you can physically do that before you start to fall apart. So even though you're on stage looking really good, your organs are probably on the brink of failure. And so they all pull back, they come off the gear, and all that weight just goes, and then you have the emotional crash that comes with coming off the gear.
Which will be more pronounced in women.
Yeah. And then now you're hoping your reproductive system is just about capable of having a child. If not, that adds to the burden. And it's why I say, look, doping amongst guys, I can kind of go, whatever, man. Boys will be boys. Do what you want to do. For women, I'm not going to say don't do it, but if you don't have a full medical and scientific setup behind you, you're probably going to do irreparable damage.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about the anabolic steroids, 100%. You know, I have to say I am against women athletes using anabolic steroids for because of what we mentioned earlier about basically emasculizing themselves. I mean, if you're happy to turn into a male, then fine. But I'm guessing 99.9% of women athletes out there are not. So, yeah, it's a situation that, like we said earlier, is gonna arise very quickly in female boxing.
Yeah, I think it's there already.
Oh yeah, I think in terms of the effects, the side effects, should I say, being caught, I think that's what's going to arise a lot more now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Larry, listen, I really appreciate this. I've enjoyed this. This has been definitely the most enjoyable episode I've done because it's. I think we've got out of it everything that we needed to. I really appreciate your time. For those listening, let people know how they can get hold of you if they have any questions.
Yeah, so I am on Twitter at Larry Olubamiwo, and I am also on Instagram at Larry Olubamiwo. So you can hit me up there, no problem.
I need to follow you as well, so I'll get on that this evening. But really appreciate it. I hope the guys listening to this, I hope this gave you everything you want. I don't think you need another episode on drugs and boxing after this. Larry, once again, mate, really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No problem. It's a pleasure.
Glad I didn't disappoint.
Definitely not, mate. Definitely not.
Thank you.
Thank you again.